At 73 years old, I was dragged out of my own home into the freezing snow because my daughter-in-law claimed I was patient zero. My son slammed the door in my face, yelling that I was going to kill his family. I stood there with no coat, no phone, and a secret that could have saved them both from financial ruin. When the police found me blue-lipped and shivering on a park bench hours later, they called my son. He didn't answer. But someone else did, and that phone call changed the deed to the house forever. I am Moses Carter, and if you are listening to this, you know that the pandemic brought out the best in some people and the absolute worst in others. Before I tell you how I turned a freezing night into a fire that burned down their lies, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been betrayed by family when you needed them most. I read every single comment. Now let me take you back to that dinner table. It was November of 2020. The world was locked down. Fear was the only currency that mattered. Outside, the Chicago wind was howling, rattling the windows of the brownstone I had bought back in 1980. Inside, the air was stifling, smelling of kale and sanitizer. We were sitting at the dinner table. My son David looked like a ghost. He had been working from home for months or so, he said, and the isolation had turned him into a ball of nerves. He jumped at shadows. He wiped down his groceries with bleach. He was terrified of the virus, but he was even more terrified of his wife. Jessica sat at the head of the table, my seat. She had claimed it weeks ago, saying the lighting was better for her brand. Jessica was what they called a wellness influencer. She spent her days shouting into her phone about toxins and spiritual cleansing, selling overpriced vitamins that I knew as a former medical professional were nothing but sugar and sawdust. That night she had her ring light set up right on the table. It cast a harsh, unnatural halo around her blonde hair. She was live streaming to her 50,000 followers. So guys, she chirped, putting on that fake bright voice she saved for the camera. Today we are talking about purifying your space. It is so important to remove negative energy and biological hazards from your sanctuary, especially with everything going on outside. We have to be vigilant. We have to be ruthless. She glanced at me when she said biological hazards. It was a subtle look, but I caught it. To her, I wasn't her husband's father. I wasn't the man who paid the mortgage. I was an old black man occupying space in her aesthetic. I was a germ. I looked down at my plate. It was some sort of vegan quinoa mush she had prepared. I missed steak, I missed flavor, but I kept my mouth shut. I picked up my glass of water to wash the dry food down. My hand slipped. Just a fraction. It happens when you get older, your grip isn't what it used to be. A splash of water hit the tablecloth. I gasped, inhaling a tiny drop of water into my windpipe. I started to cough. It was a small, dry cough, the kind you get when water goes down the wrong pipe. I covered my mouth with my napkin immediately. I turned my head away from the table. But to Jessica, it was the sound of a gunshot. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear, it was a scream for the audience. "Oh my God," she yelled, knocking her chair back. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "Did you see that?" He just coughed. He just coughed all over the food." I waved my hand, trying to catch my breath. "It is just water," I wheezed. "I choked on water." "Liar!" she shrieked. She grabbed her phone, turning the camera directly on me. "Look at him. He is sick. I told you, David. I told you he was going out without a mask. He brought it into the house. He is trying to kill us." David looked up, his eyes wide with panic. "Dad, are you sick?" I cleared my throat. The coughing had stopped. I sat up straight, regaining my dignity. "I am not sick, David," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "I was the head of infection control at Mercy Hospital for 30 years. I know what a symptom looks like. I choked on water. And for the record, I tested myself this morning with one of the kits I brought from the clinic. I am negative." Jessica wasn't listening. She was performing. She ran to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a digital thermometer. "I am not taking any chances," she yelled. She marched over to me. She was wearing a mask now, one she must have had in her pocket. She thrust the thermometer at my head. I didn't move. I let her take the reading. I knew I wasn't feverish. My body temperature runs cool, usually around 97.5. She swiped it across my forehead. She pulled it back and looked at the screen. Her eyes went wide. A theatrical, practiced widening. 104, she screamed. "David, look. 104 degrees. He is burning up. He is a walking biohazard." I frowned. That was impossible. At 104 degrees, I would be hallucinating. I would be shaking with chills. I felt perfectly normal. "Let me see that," I said, reaching for the device. She yanked it away. "Don't touch me. You are contaminated." She shoved the thermometer in David's face. Look, do you want your pregnant wife to die? Do you want your unborn child to be infected because your father is too selfish to admit he is sick? David looked at the number. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the fact that I was sitting there calmly breathing normally with no sweat on my brow. He only saw the number and he only heard his wife's hysteria. "Dad," he whispered, pushing his chair back. You have a fever. A high one." I looked at Jessica. I saw the triumphant glint in her eyes. And then I realized she had been in the kitchen before dinner making tea. She must have heated the tip of the thermometer in a mug of hot water or held it against the light bulb of the oven before bringing it out. It was a trick. A cheap, dirty trick. "Jessica," I said, my voice hardening, "give me the thermometer. I want to take the reading myself. Or better yet, let me get my medical kit from upstairs." "No," she yelled. "You are not going upstairs. You are not spreading your germs all over my house." "Your house?" I asked. "I think you are forgetting whose name is on the deed, Jessica. It doesn't matter whose name is on the paper if we are all dead," David shouted. He stood up, putting himself between me and Jessica. He was shaking. "Dad, please, you are sick. We can't risk it. She is fragile." Jessica sobbed, wrapping her arms around her stomach. "I can feel it, David. My throat is already scratching. He has been coughing all day. He has been hiding it." She looked at me with pure venom, then turned her tear-streaked face to David. "I can't stay here, David. Not with him. It is him or me." "What David asked. He has to go," Jessica said. She pointed to the back door. "He has to quarantine, away from us." David looked at the snow falling outside the window. "Where everything is closed. The hotels are full or shut down." "The garage," Jessica said. "It is detached. It is safe. He can sleep in the garage until he tests negative or until the ambulance comes." The garage. My garage was a brick structure built in the 20s. It had no insulation. It had no heating. The temperature outside was dropping to 10 degrees tonight. Inside that garage, it would be maybe 15. For a man of 73, spending the night in those temperatures wasn't quarantine. It was a death sentence. "David," I said, looking my son in the eye, "it is freezing out there. If you put me in that garage, I will die. Not from a virus I don't have, but from hypothermia." David looked at me. I saw the conflict in his eyes. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was insane. But then he looked at Jessica. She was rubbing her belly, playing the victim card with expert precision. "He thinks I am exaggerating," she sniffled. "He doesn't care about the baby. He only cares about his comfort." David's face hardened. Fear won. Weakness won. "It is only for a night or two, Dad," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Just until the fever goes down. You have plenty of coats in the closet. You can wrap up." "You cannot be serious," I said. "I am your father. I wiped your nose when you were sick. I sat by your bed when you had pneumonia. And you are going to throw me out in the snow because of a fake temperature reading." "I am protecting my family," David yelled, his voice cracking. "Why do you have to make this so difficult? Just go. Get out." He grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, trembling, but desperate. Jessica walked to the back door and opened it. A gust of icy wind blew into the kitchen, extinguishing the candles on the table. "Go," she hissed, "before you kill us all." I stood up. I shook David's hand off my arm. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had raised, the boy I had sent to private school, the man I had supported when he couldn't find a job. I looked at him and realized I didn't know him at all. "I don't need my coat," I said quietly. "Dad, take a jacket," David said, guilt flickering across his face. "I don't want anything from this house," I said. "If I am a contaminant, then my clothes are contaminated too." "Right." I walked to the door. I was wearing a thin flannel shirt and house slippers. The cold hit me instantly, biting into my skin like needles. I stopped at the threshold and looked back at Jessica. She wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling, a small, tight smile of victory. She held her phone up. She was still recording. "Stay safe, guys," she whispered to her followers. "We had to make a hard choice, but love is about protection." I stepped out into the dark. David slammed the door behind me. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I heard the chain lock slide into place. I stood there in the snow, shivering. I looked at the garage. It was a dark, frozen tomb. I wasn't going in there. I would rather freeze on the street than die in a box like a discarded animal. I turned and walked toward the gate. My slippers crunched on the ice. I had no phone. I had no wallet. I had no keys. But as the wind cut through my shirt, I felt something burning in my chest. It wasn't a fever, it was rage, and it was hot enough to keep me alive. They thought they had just taken out the trash. They didn't realize they had just thrown away the only thing standing between them and reality. And reality, as they were about to find out, is much colder than a Chicago winter. The sound of a black plastic trash bag snapping open is a sound usually reserved for kitchen waste or autumn leaves. It is a disposable sound, a cheap sound. But that night in the hallway of the home I had owned for 40 years, it was the sound of my life being discarded. David didn't look me in the eye. He couldn't. He kept his gaze fixed on the floorboards, the same oak floorboards I had sanded and stained by hand on weekends back in 1985 as he ripped the bag from the roll. He moved with a frantic, jerky energy like a man possessed by a demon he was too weak to exercise. "Dad, please," he muttered, his voice shaking. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just pack a bag, just go to the garage. It is for the safety of the pod." The pod. That was the word they used. Not family, not home. The pod. It was a sterile survivalist term that stripped away all the love and left only a cold biological imperative. I stood my ground near the staircase. I was wearing my plaid flannel pajamas and my leather slippers. I wasn't dressed for a journey. I was dressed for a Tuesday night of reading by the fire. "I am not going to the garage, David," I said, my voice low and steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Do you know what the temperature is outside? It is 10 degrees below zero. With the wind chill, it is 20 below. The garage has no insulation. It has no heat. You aren't asking me to quarantine. You are asking me to freeze to death." Jessica stood behind him, her arms crossed over her chest, her face masked by a blue surgical square. Her eyes, however, were unmasked, and they were gleaming with a cold, hard triumph. "He is being dramatic, David," she said, her voice muffled, but sharp. "He has a space heater in there. He will be fine. He just wants to stay here and infect us. He is selfish. Old people get so selfish." I looked at her. Then I looked at my son. He was pulling my winter coat out of the closet. He didn't hand it to me. He stuffed it into the trash bag. Then he grabbed my boots. Into the bag. My scarf. Into the bag. "David, stop." I shouted, the authority of a father finally breaking through the shock. He froze, holding a pair of wool socks. "This is my house," I said, stepping forward. "I bought this brownstone in 1980. I paid the down payment with the overtime money I earned working double shifts in the ER during the AIDS epidemic. I paid the mortgage every month for 30 years. I raised you in these rooms. You are a guest here, David. You and your wife are guests. You do not have the right to evict me." David flinched. The truth hit him hard. He knew I was right. For a second I saw the boy I raised flicker behind his eyes. The boy who used to cry when he saw a stray dog. The boy who had a conscience. But Jessica saw it too, and she knew exactly how to extinguish it. She took a step forward, placing a hand on David's shoulder. Then she played the card she had been saving for the kill. She let out a small, strangled sob. She dropped her hand to her stomach, her perfectly flat stomach. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling with fake terror. "I didn't want to say anything yet. I wanted to wait until we were sure. But the stress, I can feel it cramping." David spun around. "What? What are you talking about? I am pregnant." She lied. The words hung in the stale air of the hallway. I stared at her. I knew physiology. I knew the signs. She had been drinking wine with dinner every night for the past month. She had been doing high-intensity interval training in the living room just this morning. There was no morning sickness. There was no fatigue. She continued lying through her teeth with the ease of a sociopath. "I took the test this morning. I am 6 weeks along. But my immune system, the doctor said it is compromised because of the baby. If I get this virus, David, if I get what your father has, we lose the baby. We lose everything." It was a masterstroke, a lie so big, so emotionally charged that no logic could stand against it. David's face went pale. Then it went red. The fear that had been simmering in him all year boiled over into a blind protective rage. He looked at me, and the recognition was gone. I wasn't his father anymore. I was a threat. I was a biological weapon aimed at his unborn child. "You are killing them," he whispered. "David." "She is lying," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She was drinking Merlot last night." "Don't you dare!" David screamed. He dropped the trash bag. He lunged at me. He didn't hit me. It was worse. He grabbed the front of my flannel shirt with both hands. He was a grown man, 30 years old, in the prime of his life. I was 73. I was strong for my age, but I was no match for a man fueled by panic. "Get out!" he roared, spit flying from his mouth. "I won't let you kill my family." He shoved me. I stumbled backward, my slippers sliding on the hardwood floor. I hit the wall with a thud that rattled my teeth. "David, listen to me," I gasped. "No more listening. You are leaving. Now." He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the front door, not the back door to the garage anymore. He was too angry for that. He was dragging me to the street. I reached into my pocket instinctively. My iPhone. I needed to call Saul. I needed to call the police. I needed help. David saw the movement. He saw the silver glint of the phone in my hand. He snatched it. He ripped it out of my grip with such force that he nearly broke my finger. "Give that back," I yelled. "No," he shouted, holding the phone out of reach. "I know what you will do. You will call Aunt Sarah. You will call the neighbors. You will make a scene. You will bring a mob of people here to breathe on us." He shoved the phone into his own pocket. "You are not bringing anyone else here," he hissed. "You are going to go away and you are going to get better, or you aren't. But you are not doing it here." He opened the heavy oak front door. The wind didn't just blow in, it assaulted us. A wall of white snow and biting ice swirled into the warm hallway. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a second. David didn't hesitate. He put both hands on my chest. I looked at him one last time. I wanted to see regret. I wanted to see hesitation. I saw nothing but fear. He pushed, hard. I flew backwards, stumbling over the threshold down the 2 concrete steps of the porch. I landed on my knees in the snow. The cold was instantaneous. It soaked through the thin fabric of my pajama pants, seizing my joints like a vice. I looked up. David was standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm, golden light of the hallway, my hallway. Jessica stood behind him, peeking over his shoulder, her eyes crinkled in a smile that was hidden by her mask. "David," I said, my teeth already starting to chatter. "Please." He looked at me. For a second, his hand lingered on the doorknob. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "But I have to choose." He slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty, snowy street. Then came the sounds that hurt even more. The heavy click of the deadbolt sliding home, the rattle of the security chain being engaged. I stood up, my knees shaking. I walked to the window. I saw David walking away from the door. I saw Jessica walk up to him and wrap her arms around him, resting her head on his shoulder, comforting the hero who had just saved her from the monster. She reached up and turned off the porch light. Darkness swallowed me. I stood there on the porch of the house I had built in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a blizzard. I had no coat. I had no money. I had no phone. The wind howled around the corner of the building, cutting through my flannel shirt as if it weren't even there. My slippers were already soaked through. I couldn't feel my toes. I looked down the street. It was deserted. The lockdown order meant the streets were empty. No cars, no pedestrians, just endless swirling white. I was a man of science. I knew exactly what was happening to my body. Vasoconstriction, shivering response, the body pulling blood from the extremities to protect the core. I knew I had about 20 minutes before dexterity was lost, maybe an hour before consciousness faded. I looked at the house one last time. I didn't feel sad anymore. The cold has a way of freezing your emotions before it freezes your blood. I turned my back on the door. I stepped off the porch and into the deep snow of the sidewalk. If I was going to die tonight, I wasn't going to die on their doorstep like a dog waiting to be let back in. I would die on my feet walking. I took the first step, then the second, into the whiteout, into the silence. The silence of a city under lockdown is unnatural. It is not the peaceful silence of a sleeping house. It is the terrified silence of a holding cell. As I stepped off my porch and into the snow, the first thing I noticed wasn't the cold, but the emptiness. My neighborhood in Chicago, usually alive with the sound of traffic and late-night dog walkers, was a ghost town. The street lights flickered overhead, casting long, hollow shadows on the untouched snow. Every window in every house was dark, sealed shut against the invisible enemy floating in the air. I walked. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. If I stopped, I died. It was a simple biological fact. I turned toward the house next door. Mrs. Gable lived there. She was a widow, 80 years old. We used to trade gardening tips over the fence. I stumbled up her driveway, my frozen feet numb inside the soaked leather slippers. I raised my hand to knock on her door, but then I stopped. I saw a sign taped to the glass of her storm door. It was handwritten in shaky marker. Immunocompromised. Do not knock. Deliveries. Leave on step. I lowered my hand. If I pounded on her door in the middle of the night, shivering and looking like a madman, she wouldn't open it. She would call the police. Or worse, she would be too terrified to come to the door at all. The fear of the virus had turned neighbors into strangers and homes into fortresses. I couldn't do that to her. I turned back to the street. The wind hit me again, a physical blow that nearly knocked me over. It cut through my flannel pajamas as if I were naked. The snow was already ankle deep, and with every step, the ice crystals bit into my skin. I am a man of science. I spent 40 years studying the human body, learning how it fights and how it fails. As I walked down that desolate street, a part of my brain, the clinical part, the part that used to lecture interns, detached itself from the pain and began to analyze my own dying process. Hypothermia is a thief. It doesn't break in and steal your life all at once. It takes it piece by piece. Stage 1. Mild hypothermia. Core body temperature drops below 95 degrees. The body tries to generate heat. My teeth began to chatter. It was a violent, uncontrollable rattling that made my jaw ache. My muscles seized up, shaking rhythmically. This was the shivering response. My body was burning its last reserves of glucose to keep my vital organs warm. It was a good sign. It meant I was still fighting. I wrapped my arms around my chest, trying to trap whatever heat was left. I kept my head down, chin buried in my chest. One step. Another step. The wind howled like a living thing, mocking me. I reached the end of the block. My house. David's house was now a dark shape in the distance behind me. I wondered if he was watching from the window. I wondered if Jessica was toasting her victory with a glass of wine, secure in the warmth I had paid for. The anger flared up again, hot and sharp, but the cold was stronger. The cold was winning. Stage 2. Moderate hypothermia. Core temperature drops below 93. Shivering stops. I don't know how long I walked. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. Time loses its meaning when your brain starts to freeze. I reached the bus stop on the corner of Elm and State. The metal bench was covered in a drift of snow. I stopped. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead pipes. The violent shaking in my arms and legs began to fade. A calmness washed over me. This was the danger zone. When you stop shivering, it means your body has given up. It means the furnace has run out of fuel. I sat down on the bench. I knew I shouldn't. I knew that sitting down was the final mistake. But I was so tired. The exhaustion was a heavy blanket pressing down on my shoulders. And then the hallucinations started. The streetlights seemed to blur, their yellow glow stretching out into long ribbons of light. The snow swirling around me stopped looking like ice and started looking like confetti. I looked across the street, and I saw her. Sarah, my wife. She was standing under the awning of the bakery wearing the blue dress she wore on our 20th anniversary. She wasn't wearing a coat. She looked warm. She looked beautiful. She was smiling at me, waving her hand, beckoning me to come over. Moses. I heard her voice in the wind. It was clear as a bell. Come here, honey. It is warm over here. I made coffee. I smiled. My lips cracked and bled, but I didn't feel it. I am coming, Sarah, I whispered. My voice was a croak. I am just resting my eyes for a minute. I leaned my head back against the freezing metal of the bus shelter. The pain in my fingers and toes was gone. In fact, I felt warm, a delicious spreading warmth radiating from my chest. I started to unbutton my flannel shirt. Paradoxical undressing. It is the final stage. The brain, confused and dying, thinks it is burning up. I fumbled with the buttons. Sarah was walking toward me now. She looked so real. I could smell her perfume, lilacs and vanilla. I closed my eyes. It wasn't a bad way to go, I thought. Better than dying in a hospital bed with a tube down my throat. At least I was with her. Suddenly a new light pierced my eyelids. Not the soft yellow of the street lamps, but a harsh, flashing rhythm. Blue, red, blue, red. A siren chirped. Short, sharp. I opened my eyes. Sarah was gone. The warmth vanished, replaced by the crushing weight of the Chicago winter. A police cruiser had pulled up to the curb. The headlights blinded me. A spotlight swiveled, pinning me to the bench like an insect. I tried to raise my hand to shield my eyes, but my arm wouldn't move. It was frozen at my side. The car door opened. A figure stepped out. He was dressed in a thick parka, a face mask, and a tactical beanie. He approached cautiously, his hand resting on his holster. In these times, a person collapsed on the street could be a vagrant, a drunk, or a viral bomb. "Sir," the officer shouted over the wind, "you can't sleep here. It is a lockdown." I tried to speak, but my jaw was frozen shut. I could only make a low, moaning sound. The officer stepped closer. He shined his flashlight in my face. I blinked, tears freezing on my eyelashes. He knelt down, keeping his distance. "Sir, do you have identification? Are you sick?" I looked at him. I recognized the eyes above the mask. They were gray with a small scar running through the left eyebrow. I knew those eyes. 10 years ago, Mercy Hospital emergency room. A young rookie cop had rushed in carrying a 5-year-old boy who was turning blue from an anaphylactic shock. The triage nurse was overwhelmed. The paperwork was piling up, but I saw the panic in the father's eyes. I bypassed protocol. I grabbed the EpiPen myself. I intubated the boy right there in the hallway while the father held his hand. I saved his son. "Officer Miller." I stuttered. The officer froze. He leaned in closer, ignoring the social distancing rules. He squinted at me. He reached out and pulled down the collar of my shirt, seeing the stethoscope ID badge I still kept in my pocket out of habit, or perhaps seeing the face of the man who saved his world. "Dr. Carter," he whispered. He pulled his mask down for a second, revealing a look of absolute horror. "Oh my God. Dr. Carter, is that you?" I nodded weakly. Officer Miller didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for a permit. He shouted into his radio. "Dispatch. I have a code blue at Elm State. Severe hypothermia. I am transporting one male to Mercy. Notify ER prep." He grabbed me. He didn't care about the virus. He wrapped his big arms around my frozen body and lifted me off the bench as if I weighed nothing. He carried me to the cruiser and opened the back door. The heat from the car hit me like a physical wall. It was painful. As the warm air touched my skin, the nerves began to wake up, screaming in agony. I groaned as he laid me across the back seat. He ran around to the driver's side and jumped in. He cranked the heater up to the maximum. "Hang on, Doc," he said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. His voice was shaking. "I got you. I got you." "What happened? Did you fall? Did you get lost?" I lay there shivering violently as my body tried to restart its internal engine. I looked at the ceiling of the police car. I thought about David. I thought about the door slamming. I thought about the lie. I... "Don't talk," Miller said. "Save your energy. I am taking you home. I know your address. It is just down the block, right? The brownstone home." The word tasted like ash in my mouth. That building wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a place where love had died and been replaced by fear. If he took me back there, David would put on a show. He would say I wandered off. He would gaslight the police. He would lock me in the garage the moment Miller left. Or worse, I would have to look at my son's face and see the shame that would eventually kill us both. I summoned every ounce of strength I had left. I focused all my willpower on my frozen lips. "No," I rasped. Miller looked back. "What no?" "Home," I wheezed. "Not there." "Doc, you need to get inside," Miller insisted. "Your family." "No family." I interrupted, the words coming out as a harsh whisper. "They threw me out." Miller went silent. The car idled in the snow. He looked at me, processing the impossible information. The respected doctor, the neighborhood pillar, found half dead on a bench because his family threw him out. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his leather gloves creaked. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, Doc. I hear you." He put the car in gear. He didn't turn the siren on. He drove smoothly, carefully, treating me like fragile cargo. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. "The hospital." I shook my head. If I went to the hospital as a John Doe, the system would swallow me. David would find me. He was my next of kin. He would take control of my medical decisions. He would declare me incompetent. "Hotel," I whispered. 4 seasons. Miller looked at me in the mirror. His eyes crinkled with a sad smile. The Four Seasons. You got expensive taste for a man in pajamas. Doc, I have... Credit, I managed to say. Miller nodded. He understood. I wasn't a vagrant. I was a man in exile. Copy that, he said. The Four Seasons it is. And Doc. I looked at his eyes in the mirror. My son Leo. He is 15 now. He plays varsity basketball. He wouldn't be here without you. So you don't worry about the bill. You don't worry about anything tonight. You are under my protection now. He pulled the car away from the curb, away from the neighborhood that had abandoned me, away from the son who had left me to die. As we drove through the empty, snowy streets of Chicago, the pain of the thawing nerves was excruciating. It felt like my skin was on fire, but I welcomed it. Pain meant I was alive, and as long as I was alive, I had work to do. I closed my eyes and let the warmth of the police cruiser soak into my bones. I wasn't hallucinating Sarah anymore. I was seeing the future, and in that future, David was going to learn that the cold he unleashed on me was nothing compared to the storm that was coming for him. There is a specific smell to an emergency room during a crisis. It is not just bleach and rubbing alcohol. It is the metallic scent of adrenaline and the sour, heavy odor of fear. I walked these halls for 40 years. I knew every tile on the floor, every beep of the monitors, every flicker of the fluorescent lights. But tonight I wasn't Dr. Carter, the chief of infection control who used to bark orders that saved lives. I was a patient wrapped in heated blankets, shivering uncontrollably as the warmth slowly, painfully returned to my extremities. Officer Miller had bypassed the triage line. He flashed his badge and shouted my name, and suddenly the Red Sea parted. The nurses who had been overwhelmed, running on caffeine and panic, stopped dead. They recognized me. Even behind the mask, even with my skin gray from the cold, they knew who I was. Dr. Carter, one of the head nurses, gasped. She had been my student 10 years ago. "Oh my God, get a gurney! Get the warming fluids!" They ushered me into a private room away from the chaos of the waiting area where coughing patients sat, spaced 6 feet apart. They hooked me up to IVs. They checked my vitals. My temperature was 94 degrees, low but rising. I was going to live. Officer Miller stood in the corner of the room, still wearing his heavy tactical parka, looking like a guardian angel who had lost his wings. He held his phone in his hand. He looked at me, his eyes full of a mixture of pity and rage. "Doc," he said softly, "I have to make the call. Protocol says I have to notify next of kin." Next of kin. The phrase tasted like bile. "Go ahead," I croaked. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. "Put it on speaker, Miller. I want to hear it." Miller hesitated. "Are you sure? Do it." He dialed the number. I knew that number better than my own social security number. It was the number I paid the bill for. It was the number I called every Sunday when David was away at college. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. It went to voicemail. "Hi, you have reached David and Jessica. We are currently isolating and focusing on our wellness. Leave a message." Miller looked at me. I nodded. "Call again," I whispered. "He will answer. He thinks it is the police calling to tell him I am dead." Miller dialed again. This time on the second ring, the line clicked open. "Hello?" David's voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded terrified. "This is Officer Miller with the Chicago Police Department." Miller said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Am I speaking with David Carter?" There was a pause. A long, heavy silence where I could almost hear David's heart beating. "Yes," David whispered. Is it about my father?" "Yes, sir. We found a man matching your father's description. Moses Carter. He was found unconscious on a bench at Elm State. I watched Miller's face. He was waiting for the gasp. He was waiting for the question, is he okay? Is he alive? But David didn't ask that. "Oh God," David said. His voice didn't sound sad. It sounded annoyed. It sounded like someone who had just been told his Amazon package was lost. "Look, officer, my father, he is not well. He has been slipping lately. Dementia," he gets confused. I closed my eyes. The heat from the blankets was soaking into my skin, but my heart turned to ice. Dementia. That was the narrative. That was the lie he was building to justify throwing me out. He wandered off tonight. David continued gaining confidence in his lie. We tried to stop him. He got aggressive. He was talking nonsense about the house being his. He just walked out into the snow. We were terrified. Officer Miller's jaw tightened. He looked at me. I shook my head slightly. Let him talk, I signaled. Let him dig the hole. Well, Mr. Carter Miller said, his voice straining to remain professional. We have him here. He is alive. We are at Mercy Hospital. You need to come down here and sign for his release. He needs to go home. No, David shouted. The word exploded out of the speaker. Excuse me, Miller asked. I can't come get him, David stammered. We are in strict quarantine. My wife is pregnant. She is high risk. We can't expose ourselves to a hospital environment, and we can't bring him back here. Sir, he is your father, Miller said. He was freezing to death. He is sick, David yelled. He has a fever. He is a carrier. If you bring him here, you are endangering my unborn child. Put him in a state facility. Put him in a shelter. I don't care. Just don't bring him back to this house. He is not welcome here. The line went dead. Officer Miller lowered the phone slowly. He looked at the black screen, then he looked at me. He looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Doc, he whispered. I am so sorry. I lay there for a moment listening to the beep of the heart monitor. It was steady, strong, 73 years of beating, and it wasn't going to stop tonight because of a cowardly boy. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I felt a strange sense of clarity. The ambiguity was gone. The father-son bond wasn't just strained, it was severed. And when you cut off a limb, you cauterize the wound to stop the bleeding. Nurse, I said. My voice was stronger now. The nurse Sarah, no relation to my wife, but she had kind eyes, stepped forward. Yes, doctor. Carter, can I get you something for the pain? I don't need painkillers, I said. I need an iPad, and I need the Wi-Fi password. She looked confused, but she nodded. She went to the nurse's station and came back with a tablet. I sat up adjusting the bed. I wiped the condensation from the screen. Officer Miller watched me. Doc, what are you doing? Do you want me to call social services? No, Miller. I said, my fingers flying across the glass screen. I don't need social services. I need a transfer. I opened the browser. I navigated to a website that wasn't Google or Facebook. It was a secure banking portal. The logo was a small, discreet Swiss cross. David thinks I live on my pension, I said mostly to myself. He thinks I paid off the house by saving pennies from my salary at the hospital. He thinks I am just an old man with a checking account that barely covers the heating bill. I typed in my username, then the password, a complex string of characters I had memorized years ago. Face ID required. I held the iPad up. The camera scanned my tired gray face. It recognized me. Access granted. The screen refreshed. You see, Miller, I said, turning the screen so he could see it. Back in '95, I didn't just run this department. I spent my nights in the lab. I developed a synthetic coating for heart valves. It prevents rejection in transplant patients. It is used in about 60% of cardiac surgeries worldwide. Miller looked at the screen. His eyes went wide. He blinked, counting the commas. That is a lot of zeros, Doc. It is royalties, I said. Every time someone gets a new heart valve in Zurich or Tokyo or London, I get paid. I haven't touched it in 20 years. I was saving it for what Miller asked. For David, I said. I was saving it to leave him a legacy. I was going to give it all to him and Jessica to start their own life. I was going to surprise them on his 30th birthday next month. I tapped the screen, moving funds from the savings holding into my active checking account. But plans change, I said. I closed the banking app. I opened my contacts. I scrolled down to the letter S, Saul Berkowitz. Saul wasn't just a lawyer. He was a pit bull in a suit. We had played chess together in the park for 30 years. He knew where all the bodies were buried because he had helped dig the holes. I pressed call. It was 3 a.m. Saul answered on the second ring. He sounded awake. Lawyers like Saul never really sleep. They just wait for the next crisis. Moses Saul's gravelly voice came through. Why are you calling me at this hour? Did you finally get arrested for jaywalking? I am at Mercy, Saul, I said. David threw me out. There was a silence on the other end, a dangerous silence. He did what Saul asked, his voice dropping an octave. He threw me out in the snow. He claimed I had the virus. He claimed I was demented. And 10 minutes ago, he told the police to put me in a shelter because he didn't want me back in my own house. I heard the sound of a lamp clicking on. I heard the rustle of sheets. Are you okay? Saul asked. I am cold, Saul. I am very cold. But I am rich. I heard Saul let out a breath that sounded like a growl. What do you want to do? Moses, do you want an apology? Do you want cash? I looked at the window of the hospital room. Outside, the snow was still falling, covering the city in white. Somewhere out there, David was sleeping in my bed, drinking my wine, thinking he had won. "No," I said. "I don't want an apology. I want the nuclear option." "Scorched earth?" Saul asked. "Scorched earth," I confirmed. "I want you to file an emergency injunction. I want you to freeze the trust. I want you to pull the deed records." And Saul, "Yeah, find out everything you can about Jessica. Dig deep. Look at her business, look at her taxes, look at her medical records. If she sneezed in the wrong direction in 3rd grade, I want to know about it. Consider it done," Saul said. "I will have the papers ready by breakfast." Moses, "Yeah, I am sorry, my friend." "Don't be," I said. "Just be expensive." I hung up the phone. I handed the iPad back to the nurse. I lay back on the pillows. The shivering had stopped completely. Officer Miller was looking at me with a new expression. It wasn't pity anymore. It was respect, and maybe a little bit of fear. "You are going to take the house back?" Miller asked. I looked at the ceiling. "Miller," I said, "I am not just going to take the house back. I am going to take the ground they walk on." The silent son thought he had silenced his father. He didn't realize that silence isn't empty. Silence is where the storm gathers before it breaks. And the forecast for tomorrow was heavy thunder. The only sound in my hospital room was the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor and the soft hum of the central heating. It was a sterile, comforting sound, the soundtrack of my entire professional life. But as I sat there propped up against the stiff hospital pillows waiting for the feeling to fully return to my frostbitten toes, I wasn't focused on my recovery. I was focused on the iPad resting on my lap. Officer Miller had left an hour ago to file the report. The nurses were busy changing shifts. I was alone. David had told the police he couldn't come to get me because he was in strict quarantine. He had painted a picture of a terrified, vulnerable family huddling in fear of a deadly virus protecting an unborn child. It was a compelling story. It was the kind of story that makes people sympathetic. But I knew my house. And I knew that in the 21st century, walls have eyes. I opened the smart home application. I had installed the system 3 years ago after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. High-definition cameras in the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, and the exterior. Motion sensors, audio recording. I controlled it all from the master account, an account David didn't have the password to because he always said technology was too intrusive. I tapped the icon. The screen loaded. A spinning wheel of death that felt like it lasted a lifetime. Then the feed popped up. Camera 1 living room. I expected to see a dark house. I expected to see David and Jessica sitting on the couch, perhaps looking somber, perhaps arguing about what they had done. I expected to see the heavy atmosphere of a home that had just expelled its patriarch into a blizzard. What I saw made the bile rise in my throat. My living room was blazing with light. The fireplace, which I only used on Christmas Eve, was roaring. And the room wasn't empty. It was packed. There were at least 10 people. I zoomed in. I recognized them. There was Tyler, the personal trainer Jessica claimed was her spiritual guru. There was Madison, a fellow influencer who sold diet tea that gave people dysentery. There were people I didn't even know, strangers wearing muddy boots on my Persian rug. Not a single mask in sight. Social distancing. They were draped over each other on my leather sofa like a litter of puppies. I turned up the volume on the iPad. The sound of bass-heavy pop music flooded my quiet hospital room. They were playing music loud enough to shake the windows. I watched David, my son, the boy who just hours ago had screamed that I was a biological weapon. He was standing by the fireplace holding a bottle of wine. I squinted at the screen. It wasn't just any wine. It was a 1995 Opus 1. A bottle I had been saving for his wedding day, which he had eloped for and then saved for the birth of his first child. It was a $600 bottle of Cabernet. He was chugging it straight from the bottle. He looked flushed. He looked manic. He wasn't grieving. He was celebrating. I switched the camera view to the kitchen. Jessica was there. She was holding court at the island, surrounded by 3 of her friends. She looked radiant. The fragile woman who was so immunocompromised that she couldn't breathe the same air as me was laughing so hard she was nearly doubling over. I tapped the audio feed for the kitchen. Her voice came through crystal clear. "Oh my God, you guys should have seen his face," Jessica shrieked. She slammed her hand on the counter. He looked like a sad, wet puppy. "But it is cold outside, David." Her friends erupted in laughter. He actually tried to pull the "I bought this house" card, Jessica continued, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. Can you believe the audacity? Like, okay, boomer, you bought it 40 years ago for $5 and a handshake. It is prime real estate now. It needs someone who knows how to monetize it. Monetize it. One of the friends, a girl with pink hair, leaned in. So, is he gone for good? Like, really gone? Jessica smirked. She looked directly at the camera, not knowing I was watching, not knowing I was the ghost in the machine. He is gone, she said. David locked the deadbolt. And honestly, if the cold doesn't get him, the shock will. He is 73. He is weak. He was just taking up space. She spun around, gesturing to the open concept living area. But look at this space, she yelled. Now that his dusty old recliner is gone, I can finally set up the ring lights properly. The lighting in here is perfect for morning yoga flows. I am going to turn his bedroom into a sauna. I need a place to detox. And the basement. That is going to be David's man cave, so he stops bothering me while I am filming. A sauna. She wanted to turn the room where my wife died, the room where I had grieved for 10 years, into a sweatbox for her vanity. I watched David walk into the kitchen. He wrapped his arm around Jessica's waist. He looked drunk. His eyes were glassy. Babe, he slurred. The wine is gone. Do we have more? Jessica kissed him. Not a peck. A long, sloppy kiss that no terrified, germ-phobic person would ever give. Check the cellar, babe, she said. The old man has crates of the stuff down there. Drink it all. We are celebrating freedom, freedom. He had thrown his father into a snowbank to die, and he called it freedom. But then came the moment that froze my blood colder than the Chicago winter ever could. Jessica pulled away from David. She clapped her hands. Okay, who is ready for shots? She yelled. Her friends cheered. Tequila, tequila. I watched closely. Surely she wouldn't. She had told David she was 6 weeks pregnant. She had told him her immune system was compromised because of the baby. That was the entire reason for my eviction. That was the lie that broke my son's loyalty. Jessica reached into a shopping bag on the counter. She pulled out a bottle of Don Julio 1942, expensive tequila. She lined up 5 shot glasses. She poured them full. I held my breath. I waited for her to pass hers to someone else. I waited for her to say, "Oh, not for me, I am expecting." She picked up the glass. She raised it in a toast. To the Carter estate, she screamed. Under new management, she threw her head back and downed the shot in one gulp. She didn't flinch. She slammed the glass down on the counter and licked salt off her hand. I hit the record button on my iPad. I recorded it all. The drinking, the toast, the lack of a baby bump, the utter lack of hesitation. As a medical professional, I know a lot about pregnancy. I know about fetal alcohol syndrome. I know that no mother, no matter how reckless, drinks 3 ounces of hard liquor in a single gulp if she believes there is life inside her. She wasn't pregnant, there was no baby, there was no compromised immune system, there was no fear of the virus, it was all a play. A performance designed to trigger David's protective instincts and turn him against me. She had weaponized his desire to be a father to make him a patricide. I zoomed in on the video. I captured the frame where the tequila touched her lips. I captured the frame where David handed her the bottle for a refill. I saved the clip. I backed it up to the cloud. I emailed a copy to Saul. I lay back on the bed. The rage I felt wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. It was absolute. It was the kind of anger that doesn't scream. It plans. "You want a sauna, Jessica," I whispered to the screen. "You want to monetize my house?" I looked at the timestamp on the video. 11:42 p.m. You just gave me the evidence to bury you. You aren't pregnant. You are just a parasite. And I have the cure. I watched for another hour. I watched them get drunker. I watched them spill wine on the carpet. I watched them mock my photos on the mantle. Enjoy the party, children, I thought. Drink up. Because this is the most expensive drink you will ever have. It is going to cost you the roof over your heads. I turned off the iPad. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there plotting the demolition of my son's life brick by brick. They had their party. Now it was my turn to bring the hangover. Revenge is often said to be a dish best served cold, but I have found that it is even better when served digitally from a warm hospital bed with a side of absolute financial panic. I lay in my room at Mercy Hospital, the iPad propped up on my knees. My body temperature had risen to 97 degrees. The shivering had stopped, replaced by a dull, aching soreness in my joints. But my mind, My mind was razor sharp. I was watching a reality show that I was producing in real time. The camera feed from my kitchen was crystal clear. It was 1 in the morning. The tequila was flowing. The music was thumping, and the gluttony had set in. I watched David pull out his phone. He was standing by the kitchen island, swaying slightly. He looked at Jessica, who was busy taking selfies with her friends, making duck lips at the camera while holding a bottle of my vintage wine. Babe David shouted over the music, "The sushi place closes in 20 minutes. I am going to put in the order." "What do you want?" Jessica didn't even look up. "Get the omakase platter," she yelled. "The one with the gold leaf. And get some Wagyu skewers for Tyler. He needs his protein." The gold leaf? Of course. Because regular fish wasn't enough. They needed to eat gold while they threw me out to freeze. I watched David open the delivery app. I knew exactly which card was linked to that account. It was a supplementary American Express Platinum card I had given him 5 years ago. I gave it to him for emergencies, for car repairs, for medical bills. He was using it to buy $500 worth of raw fish for a room full of strangers. I tapped the screen of my iPad. I had the banking notification center open. I saw the request come in instantly. Transaction attempt Sushi Yoshi, amount $542, and then a split second later the beautiful red text appeared. Status declined. Code 05, do not honor. On the camera feed, David frowned. He tapped his phone screen aggressively. He thought it was a glitch. He tried again. Status declined. He muttered a curse word. He looked around nervously to see if anyone was watching. He didn't want to look broke in front of Jessica's influencer friends. He switched cards. He tried the Visa, the one I paid off every month because he claimed his freelance checks were always late. Status declined. Account frozen. David's face began to change. The drunken flush evaporated, replaced by the pale, sickly color of fear. He walked out of the kitchen, away from the noise. He went into the hallway, the same hallway where he had shoved me out the door hours earlier. I switched the camera feed to the hallway cam. David was pacing. He was sweating. He dialed a number. I knew who he was calling. He was calling the priority banking line. I turned up the volume on the iPad. He put the phone to his ear. He cleared his throat. He tried to lower his voice to add a gravelly texture to it. He was trying to sound like me. It was a pathetic impression. He sounded like a child wearing his father's shoes. "Yes, this is Dr. Moses Carter," David said into the phone. "I am trying to make a purchase and my card is being declined. This is unacceptable. I have been a client for 40 years. I smiled. He didn't know. He didn't know that Saul had called the bank manager, Mr. Henderson, at his home number an hour ago. He didn't know that the trap was already sprung. I couldn't hear the bank representative on the other end, but I could hear David's reaction. And it was priceless. "What do you mean security hold?" David asked, his voice rising. "I am answering the security questions. My mother's maiden name is Williams. My first pet was a dog named Buster. Unlock the card." He paused. He listened. Suddenly he stopped pacing. He leaned against the wall as if his legs had turned to water. What he whispered. He listened for another 10 seconds. His hand started to shake. The phone slipped slightly in his grip. "No, that is a mistake," David stammered. "I am not dead. I mean, Moses isn't dead. He is just unavailable." The representative must have repeated the script Saul gave them. "Sir, we have a police report on file stating the account holder is missing and presumed endangered. We have initiated the deceased/missing persons protocol. All assets are frozen, pending a probate court order or the physical appearance of the account holder at a branch with government ID." David hung up the phone. He didn't say goodbye. He just let his arm drop to his side. He stood there in the hallway, staring at the front door. He wasn't thinking about me. He wasn't thinking, "Oh my God, my father might actually be dead in the snow." He wasn't consumed with grief. He was doing math. I could see the gears turning in his head. If I was dead or missing, the money was locked. The house was locked. The trust was locked. He had declared me missing to the police to cover his own tracks, to explain why he wouldn't come to the hospital. But he hadn't realized that by telling the police I was a wandering, demented old man who disappeared, he had effectively locked himself out of the vault. He had lied to save his reputation, and that lie had just cost him his lifestyle. He walked back into the kitchen. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Jessica was still sitting on the counter, swinging her legs. "Did you order the food?" she asked, scrolling through Instagram. "I am starving." David didn't answer. He walked over to the fridge and opened it, staring blankly at the shelves. David, Jessica snapped. I asked you a question. Is the food coming? David closed the fridge. He turned around. He looked terrified. The cards aren't working, he whispered. Jessica stopped scrolling. She looked up. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean they aren't working? Try the other one. Try the platinum one. I did, David said. I tried them all. They are declined. Jessica laughed, but it was a nervous, angry sound. Don't be stupid, David. Your dad has millions. The limit on that card is practically infinite. You probably entered the code wrong. Give me your phone. She hopped off the counter and snatched the phone from his hand. She started tapping furiously. I watched on the iPad. Another transaction attempt. Status declined. What the hell? Jessica screamed. She threw the phone onto the granite countertop. It slid across and hit the fruit bowl. I called the bank, David said, his voice trembling. They locked the accounts. Why? Jessica demanded, hands on her hips. The playful party girl was gone. The monster was back. Because of the police report, David said, because I told Officer Miller that Dad was missing. The bank thinks he is dead. They froze everything. The room went silent. The music was still playing, some mindless pop song about money and cars, but nobody was dancing anymore. Jessica's friends looked at each other, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Jessica stared at David. She didn't look worried about my safety. She looked furious. You idiot, she hissed. You absolute idiot. You told them he was missing. I had to, David pleaded. To explain why we couldn't go get him. You said we had to protect the baby. I didn't tell you to freeze the bank accounts, Jessica shrieked. She grabbed a glass of wine and threw it into the sink. It shattered, red liquid splashing over the white tiles like blood. Do you know what I have in my cart right now? She yelled, advancing on him. Do you? I have $3,000 worth of lighting equipment. I have the new backdrop. I have the pre-order for the new iPhone. I need that stuff for my brand. David, I need it for the nursery. She poked him hard in the chest. You told me he was rich. You told me if we got him out of the house, we would have control. You said you had power of attorney. I do, David cried. I do have it. Then use it. Fix this, I can't, David shouted back, finally snapping. It doesn't work if the bank thinks he is a missing person. It takes months to clear that up. We have no money. Jessica, zero. Jessica stared at him. Her mouth hung open. No money, she whispered. I have $40 in my wallet, David admitted, and my personal account is overdrawn. Jessica looked around the room. She looked at her friends who were now awkwardly putting on their coats, realizing the party was over. She looked at the empty sushi platter she had envisioned. She looked at the expensive wine they had already drunk, wine they couldn't replace. Get out, she said to her friends. Everyone out. Now. They didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled for the door. When they were alone, Jessica turned on David with a fury that was terrifying to behold. You fix this, she growled. I don't care how. Go find the old man. Drag him back here. Make him call the bank. I am not going to be poor, David. I didn't marry you to live like a peasant. But the virus. David stammered. You said he would kill the baby. I don't care about the virus right now. I care about my credit card, Jessica screamed. And there it was, the truth, naked and ugly. I watched from my hospital bed. I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. She had dropped the act. There was no fear for the unborn child because there was no child. There was only fear of poverty. There was only the desperate clawing hunger of a gold digger who just realized the mine had collapsed. David looked at her. He looked confused, betrayed. He was just starting to realize that his wife's fear of germs was flexible, but her love for money was rigid. I am going to bed, Jessica announced. If that account isn't unlocked by morning, David, you are going to be sleeping in the garage with your father's ghost. She stomped out of the room. David stood alone in the kitchen. He looked at the shattered wine glass in the sink. He looked at his phone, useless and frozen. He sank to the floor. He put his head in his hands. I watched him. I didn't feel sorry for him. He had made his choice. He had chosen the girl who loved things over the man who loved him. I tapped the iPad screen. I opened the banking app again. I set a notification alert for any further attempts. Sleep tight, son, I whispered. The heat is off. The water is next. And tomorrow the landlord comes collecting. 3 days is a long time in politics, but it is an eternity in a house that has run out of money. When you cut off the financial blood supply to a tumor, it doesn't just shrink, it gets angry, it starts to feed on itself. I was no longer in the hospital. I was sitting in a plush velvet armchair in the presidential suite of the Four Seasons Chicago. The view from the 46th floor was breathtaking, a panorama of the frozen city and the icy lake beyond. But I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at my iPad, monitoring the feed from the house I used to call home. The atmosphere in my kitchen had shifted dramatically from the tequila-soaked party of Tuesday night. The expensive wine was gone. The sushi was a distant memory. The heating was still on, but the warmth in the room had evaporated. It was 8 in the morning on Friday. David and Jessica were sitting at the kitchen island. The granite countertop, usually cluttered with Jessica's beauty products and organic smoothies, was bare except for a box of generic cornflakes and a carton of milk that looked dangerously close to its expiration date. David looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. Dark circles hung under his eyes like bruises. He was wearing the same sweatpants he had worn when he shoved me out the door. He was staring into his bowl of soggy cereal as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Jessica looked worse. For an influencer who preached the gospel of glow and vitality, she looked remarkably gray. Her roots were showing. Her nails were chipped. Without the ring lights and the filters, she was just a mean, scared woman eating cheap carbohydrates. "I can't believe we are eating this," Jessica muttered, pushing her bowl away. "It tastes like cardboard." "It is all we have, Jess," David said, his voice flat and defeated. I checked the pantry. "We are out of coffee. We are out of eggs. And since the cards are locked, I can't order anything." "Then fix it," she snapped. "Go to the bank. Scream at them. Tell them your father is senile and forgot his password." "I tried," David yelled back, slamming his spoon down. Milk splashed onto the counter. "I spent 4 hours on the phone yesterday. They won't talk to me. They said the account holder is flagged as missing. Unless Moses Carter walks into a branch with a photo ID that money is frozen in a block of ice." Jessica crossed her arms. "Well, he isn't walking anywhere, is he? He is probably a popsicle in some snowbank by now." David flinched. He looked at the back door, the one leading to the garage. He still hadn't gone out there to check. He was too cowardly to face the reality of what he had done. He preferred the Schrodinger's cat scenario. As long as he didn't look, I was neither dead nor alive. I was just gone. "If he is dead," Jessica continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "that is actually better for us." David looked at her horrified. "Jessica, stop." "I am serious, David. Think about it. If he is dead, you inherit everything. The house, the trust, the royalties. We just have to wait for the police to find him. Then we play the grieving family. We sue the city for not clearing the sidewalks. We get a payout. And then the bank unlocks the accounts." I gripped the armrests of my chair in the hotel suite. She was planning to monetize my death before my body was even cold. Suddenly a sound echoed through the house. Boom, boom, boom. 3 heavy, authoritative knocks on the front door. David jumped so hard he nearly fell off his stool. Jessica froze, her eyes widening. "Is that the police?" she whispered. David swallowed hard. He looked at the door as if it were a portal to hell. "Maybe they found him," he whispered. "Go answer it," Jessica hissed. "And remember, you are sad. You are devastated. Squeeze out a tear if you can." David stood up. He ran a hand through his greasy hair. He took a deep breath, composing his face into a mask of tragic concern. He walked to the hallway. I switched the camera feed to the front door view. David looked through the peephole. He saw the uniform. He saw the badge. He opened the door. Officer Miller stood there. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 other officers, their faces obscured by masks, carrying large cardboard boxes. Officer Miller didn't look friendly. The warmth he had shown me in the hospital was gone. His eyes were cold, hard flint. David Carter Miller asked, though he knew exactly who he was looking at. "Yes," David said, his voice trembling. Do you have news? Is it my father?" David leaned against the doorframe, performing his grief. "We have been so worried. I wanted to go look for him, but with the quarantine... Did you find him?" Miller stared at him. He let the silence stretch out, letting David sweat in the freezing draft coming through the open door. "We found him," Miller said, flatly. David let out a breath that sounded like relief, but I knew it was relief that his financial problems were solved. "Oh God," David said, covering his mouth with his hand. "He is gone, isn't he?" The cold, It was too much for him. He looked back at Jessica, who was lurking in the hallway shadows. She nodded encouragingly. "I need to know," Officer David said, looking back at Miller. "Is he dead?" Miller didn't blink. "No, sir. He is not dead." David's face fell. It was a subtle shift, but I saw it. The hope of an easy inheritance vanished, replaced by the terror of consequences. He is alive," David stammered. "Very much so," Miller said. "He is currently residing in the presidential suite at the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. He is warm, he is well fed, and he is very, very lucid." David's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. The Four Seasons. But he doesn't have any money. His pension. Miller smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator playing with its food. "Your father has substantial resources, Mr. Carter, resources he has chosen to access now that he is no longer supporting you." Miller reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a police report. It was a thick sheaf of legal papers stamped with the seal of the Cook County Court. "We are not here to deliver a death notification," Miller said. "We are here to execute a court order." He shoved the papers into David's chest. David instinctively grabbed them. "What is this?" David asked. "That is a lawsuit," Miller explained, stepping into the foyer, forcing David to back up. "Moses Carter is suing you, David Carter, and your wife, Jessica Carter, for abandonment of a dependent elder, abuse, and criminal trespassing." "Trespassing?" Jessica shrieked, stepping out of the shadows. "This is our house. We live here." Miller turned his cold gaze to Jessica. "According to the deed and the trust documents filed this morning by Mr. Carter's attorney, you are guests," Miller said. "Guests who have overstayed their welcome." He signaled to the officers behind him. "We are also here to retrieve Mr. Carter's personal effects," Miller continued. "His clothes, his medical journals, his chess set, and his computer. We have a list. Please step aside." The officers marched past David, heading up the stairs to my bedroom. David looked at the papers in his hand. He flipped to the second page. His hands were shaking so badly the paper made a rattling sound. Officer David pleaded, "This is a mistake. My father is confused. He has dementia. He doesn't know what he is doing." Miller stopped. He turned around slowly. He walked up to David until he was inches from his face. "I spoke to your father for 3 hours last night," Miller said quietly. "He remembers everything, David. He remembers you pushing him. He remembers you stealing his phone. He remembers the door locking. That is not dementia. That is a witness statement." David paled. "And he remembers you telling me to put him in a shelter," Miller added. David looked down at the floor. "But—" "The baby," David whispered. "We did it for the baby." Miller looked at Jessica. He looked at her flat stomach. He looked at the empty bottles of wine and tequila visible on the kitchen counter behind her. "Right," Miller said dryly. "The baby. Well, you better hope that baby likes moving vans." He pointed to the bottom of the document in David's hand. "Read the last paragraph, David." David looked down. He read it out loud, his voice barely a whisper. "Notice to quit. The occupants have 30 days to vacate the premises located at 404 Maple Drive. Failure to comply will result in forcible eviction by the Sheriff's Department." 30 days. Jessica screamed. "You can't do that. It is a pandemic." "There is an eviction moratorium." Miller shook his head. "The moratorium applies to tenants who can't pay rent due to COVID," he said. "It does not apply to squatters who abuse the homeowner. You aren't tenants. You don't have a lease. You are intruders." The officers came back down the stairs carrying 3 large boxes. My life packed into cardboard. They had my winter coats. They had my laptop. They had the framed photo of Sarah from the nightstand. "We have what we came for," Miller said. He turned to the door. 30 days, folks," Miller called out over his shoulder. "And if I were you, I wouldn't try to damage the property on your way out. We took photos of everything. If a single light bulb is missing, Mr. Carter will press felony vandalism charges." He walked out. The door closed. David and Jessica stood in the hallway. The silence was heavy, suffocating. David looked at the eviction notice. Then he looked at Jessica. "He is at the Four Seasons," David whispered. "He has money." "He has so much money!" Jessica snatched the papers from his hand. She didn't read them. She threw them on the floor. "He is lying," she screamed. "He is bluffing. He is just a lonely old man. We are going to fight this. We are going to counter-sue." "With what money?" Jess, David asked, his voice cracking. The accounts are frozen. We have $40. Jessica stared at him. Her eyes darted around the hallway, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for someone to blame. This is your fault, she hissed. You should have checked the garage. You should have made sure he stayed there. You let him get away. David looked at her. For the first time, I saw a spark of resentment in his eyes. I let him get away, David asked. You were the one who told me to throw him out. You were the one who said he was killing the baby. Don't you dare blame me, Jessica yelled. I turned off the iPad. The show was just getting started. They were turning on each other. The pressure cooker was sealed, and I had just turned up the heat. I rang the bell for room service. I would like the lobster Benedict, please, I told the concierge. And a pot of coffee, 30 days. I intended to enjoy every single one of them. The ringtone of a desperate son is a sound I never wanted to learn to recognize. It is a frantic, jagged sound vibrating with the energy of a man who realizes the walls are closing in. It was 2 days after Officer Miller had served the eviction notice. I was sitting in the Four Seasons suite enjoying a cup of Earl Grey tea and reading a medical journal about the latest vaccine developments. The world was panicking, but up here in my ivory tower, everything was calm. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. David. I let it ring 3 times. In business and in discipline, silence is leverage. Finally, I answered. I didn't say hello. I just listened. Dad. David's voice cracked. He was crying. Not the fake theatrical sobbing he used for the police, but the ugly, snot-nosed crying of a child who has scraped his knee. Dad, please. You have to stop this. You have to call the lawyers off. I took a sip of tea. I am not calling anyone off, David. You have 27 days left. I suggest you start packing the china. You can't do this, he screamed, his voice turning shrill. It is a pandemic. We have nowhere to go. And Jessica is sick. The stress is killing her. I didn't blink. Jessica is resilient. I am sure she will find a way to monetize her misery. Dad, listen to me. David pleaded. It is not about us. It is about the baby. Your grandchild. How can you be so cruel? How can you throw your own flesh and blood out into the street? You are going to kill him before he is even born. The grandchild card. The ultimate ace in the hole. He knew that despite my cold exterior, I was a man of legacy. I wanted the Carter name to live on. I wanted to teach a grandson how to play chess, how to tie a tie, how to be a man better than I had taught his father. I paused. I let the silence stretch out until I could hear David's ragged breathing on the other end. If you want to discuss the family, David, I said calmly, we will do it face to face. Really? David gasped, hope flooding his voice. You will come home. No, I said. I am not stepping foot in that house until it has been fumigated. Send me a Zoom link, 5 minutes, and have your wife present. I want to see her condition for myself. I hung up. 5 minutes later, my iPad chimed. I accepted the call. The video feed flickered to life. The connection was grainy. They were stealing Wi-Fi from the neighbors after all, but the image was clear enough. They were sitting on the living room couch, the same leather couch where I used to nap on Sundays. The contrast between us was stark. I was wearing a pressed silk robe sitting in a sun-drenched suite. They looked like refugees in their own living room. The house was messy, takeout boxes piled up. The lighting was dim. Jessica was the center of the frame. She had really committed to the role. She was wrapped in a thick wool blanket, shivering slightly despite the central heating being on full blast. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She clutched a hot water bottle to her stomach as if she were holding the fragile orb of life itself. David sat next to her, looking haggard. He held her hand with both of his, rubbing her knuckles. Dad, David said, leaning into the camera. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Look at her. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. The morning sickness is brutal. I looked at Jessica. She gave a weak, fluttery wave. Her eyes were heavy-lidded. Hi, Moses, she whispered, her voice raspy. I am sorry about everything. My hormones are all over the place. I was just trying to protect the baby. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. I put on my doctor's face, the face I used when I had to tell a patient that their lifestyle choices were killing them. I understand, Jessica, I said smoothly. Pregnancy is a delicate time, especially in the first trimester. She nodded weakly, dabbing her eye with a tissue. It is so hard. I feel so weak. I need to ask a few clinical questions, I said, to understand the risk factors. If I am going to stop the eviction, I need to know exactly what we are dealing with. David nodded eagerly. Anything, Dad. Ask anything. How far along are you, Jessica? I asked. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Just a beat. 8 weeks, she said. I am 8 weeks along. I nodded. 8 weeks. That is a critical developmental window. The neural tube is closing, the heart is beating. Yes, she whispered. I can feel it. A mother's intuition. And the symptoms I asked. Nausea, dizziness, sensitivity to smells. That is why I reacted so badly to your scent that night. It triggered my gag reflex. I ignored the insult. And your diet. Are you taking your prenatal vitamins, avoiding teratogens? Of course, David interjected proudly. Jessica is a temple. She eats only organic, no caffeine, no alcohol, nothing that could hurt the baby. She has been strict about it since the day we found out. Since the day you found out, I repeated. Which was when? 4 weeks ago, Jessica said. So for the last month, you have been completely sober. No alcohol. David looked offended. Dad, how can you even ask that Jessica is a wellness influencer? She knows better than anyone. She hasn't touched a drop of alcohol in months. She won't even use mouthwash if it has alcohol in it. I smiled. It was a cold, tight smile. That is excellent, I said, because as a medical professional, I have seen the damage alcohol can do to a fetus at 8 weeks. It is catastrophic. I tapped the screen of my iPad. I have something I want to show you, I said. I have been reviewing some data. I think you will find it enlightening. I hit the share screen button. On their end, the video of my face disappeared, replaced by a black window. Then I pressed play. The timestamp on the video was Tuesday night, 11:42 p.m., 3 nights ago, the night I was freezing on a park bench. The audio exploded through their laptop speakers, the thumping bass of a pop song, the shrieking laughter. On the screen, my living room appeared in high definition. David, watching on his laptop, squinted. He saw himself. He saw the friends. He saw the party. And then he saw Jessica. In the video, Jessica wasn't the frail blanket-wrapped invalid she was pretending to be right now. She was standing on top of the coffee table. She was wearing a tight crop top. She was holding a bottle of Don Julio 1942 tequila in one hand and a shot glass in the other. I watched David's face on my monitor. His jaw dropped. His eyes bulged. In the video, Jessica raised the bottle. To the Carter estate, the video, Jessica screamed. Under new management, she poured the tequila. It wasn't a sip. It was a heavy pour. She threw her head back. She downed the shot. She slammed the glass down. She didn't gag. She didn't vomit. She licked salt off her wrist and wooed. Then she did another one, and another one. I let the video play for a full minute. I let David watch his fragile temple of a wife do body shots off a stranger's stomach. I let him watch her jumping up and down on the furniture, vibrating with energy, showing absolutely no signs of morning sickness or fatigue. I stopped the video. I switched back to the camera view. The silence in that living room was deafening. David was staring at the screen. He looked like he had been hit with a sledgehammer. He slowly turned his head to look at Jessica. Jessica wasn't shivering anymore. The blanket had fallen from her shoulders. Her face wasn't pale. It was bright crimson. She looked trapped. She looked like a rat caught in a floodlight. Dad, David whispered, his voice trembling. What? When was that? That was Tuesday. David, I said, my voice cutting through the digital air like a scalpel. 3 nights ago. While I was in the emergency room being treated for hypothermia, your wife was drinking tequila straight from the bottle. I leaned into the camera. Now, David, I am a board-certified physician. I have delivered hundreds of babies. I have treated thousands of patients. And in 40 years of medicine, I have never ever seen a pregnant woman drink tequila like it was tap water. I paused. There are only 2 possibilities here, son. Either your wife is trying to induce a miscarriage on my coffee table, or there is no baby. David looked at Jessica. His eyes were wide, filled with a horror that transcended the financial ruin. This was personal betrayal. This was the destruction of his dream. Jess? He croaked. Jessica scrambled. She tried to pull the blanket back up. She tried to summon the tears again. David, it was apple juice. We were just pretending for the video. It was a skit. Apple juice, I asked. Since when does apple juice come in a sealed, tax-stamped bottle of Don Julio that costs $200? I saw you break the seal, Jessica. I have that clip too. Do you want me to play it? David stood up. He backed away from her. He looked at her stomach, the flat stomach she had been clutching so protectively moments ago. You lied, he whispered. David. No, Jessica cried, reaching for him. I miscarried. That night I was drinking to numb the pain. You just said you were 8 weeks along, I shouted from the iPad. You just told me the baby was kicking. Which is it, Jessica? Is the baby kicking, or did you drink it away on Tuesday? She froze. She had trapped herself in her own web. She couldn't keep the timeline straight. David looked at me on the screen. He looked broken. He looked small. She is not pregnant, is she? David asked me. No. David, I said softly. She is not. She never was. She used your desire for a family to manipulate you into evicting your own father. She played you, and she nearly killed me to do it. David turned back to Jessica. His hands were shaking. You told me he was dangerous, David said, his voice rising. You told me he would kill our child. I threw my father into a blizzard because you said he was a threat to a baby that doesn't even exist. Jessica stood up. The act was over. The frailty vanished. She crossed her arms, her face twisting into a sneer. So what, she snapped. We needed the house, David. We needed him gone. He is old. He has had his turn. Why should we live in his shadow when we could have it all? I did it for us. You did it for you, David said. He sounded disgusted. I watched them. The cracks in their foundation were widening into canyons. I have seen enough, I said. David looked at the screen. Dad, I didn't know. I swear. It doesn't matter what you knew, David, I said. It matters what you did. You chose a liar over your father, and now you are going to live with that choice. I reached for the button to end the call. 27 days, David, I said. Tick-tock. I clicked end. The screen went black. I sat alone in my suite. I didn't feel happy. Exposing a lie doesn't fix the damage it caused. It just stops the infection from spreading. My son was married to a monster, but he was the one who had opened the door and let her in. I poured myself another cup of tea. It had gone cold. I drank it anyway. I had gotten used to the cold. When you corner a pathogen in a petri dish, it does not surrender. It mutates. It changes its protein coat to trick the immune system. It fights for survival with a biological desperation that is terrifying to behold. Jessica was no different. I had cornered her with the truth about her fake pregnancy. I had exposed her lies to her husband. I expected her to retreat, to pack her bags and leave in shame. But I underestimated the malignancy of her narcissism. Instead of packing, she set up her ring light. I was sitting in the Four Seasons suite watching the snow fall over Lake Michigan when my phone started blowing up. Not calls, notifications, hundreds of them, buzzing against the mahogany table like an angry hive of bees. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I picked up the phone. My name was trending. Hashtag protect Jessica. Hashtag stand with survivors. Hashtag monster in the house. I clicked on the first link. It was a live stream. Jessica was live right now. She sat on the floor of my living room, leaning against the beige wall. She had scrubbed her face clean of makeup, leaving her looking pale and vulnerable. She wore an oversized gray sweatshirt that swallowed her frame, making her look like a child. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Guys, she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. I didn't want to do this. I wanted to keep this private. But the harassment has just become too much. She wiped a tear from her cheek. You have all been asking why David kicked his father out. You have been calling us monsters for putting an old man in the snow. She looked directly into the lens, her eyes wide and pleading. We didn't kick him out because of the virus. We kicked him out because I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. My stomach turned. I knew where she was going. I sat up straighter in my chair, gripping the iPad. He is a lonely man, she continued. And I tried to be kind. I tried to be a good daughter-in-law. But he started looking at me in ways a father shouldn't look. He would make comments about my body. He would walk into rooms without knocking when I was changing. Lies, vile, disgusting lies. I had spent 40 years in medicine. I had treated thousands of women with nothing but the utmost professional respect. I had never once looked at Jessica with anything other than mild annoyance or disappointment. But she wasn't done. Last Tuesday she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He tried to touch me, in the kitchen. I screamed for David. That is why David threw him out. He wasn't protecting us from COVID. He was protecting me from a predator. The chat stream on the side of the video was moving so fast it was a blur of hatred. Kill him. What a sick old man. David is a hero. Call the police. This is why we don't trust them. She had played the ultimate card, the damsel in distress, the innocent white woman threatened by the dangerous, predatory black man. It was a trope as old as America, and she wielded it with the precision of a surgeon. We tried to be quiet about it. She sniffled. We didn't want to ruin his reputation. He is a doctor. We just wanted him gone. But now he is suing us. He is using his money and his lawyers to bully us into silence. He wants to take the house back so he can finish what he started. She broke down into jagged, heaving sobs. Please, she cried, please help us. We are running out of money fighting his legal team. If you can spare anything, the link to our GoFundMe is in the bio. I turned off the video. I sat in the silence of the hotel room. I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't just a lie about a pregnancy. This was an assassination. She was murdering my character to save her bank account. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. 46 floors down, I saw a news van pulling up to the hotel entrance. Then another. They had found out where I was staying. The mob was gathering. My phone rang. It was Saul. Moses Saul's voice was tight. Are you watching this? I saw it, Saul. You need to issue a statement, Saul said. Immediately. We need to deny this. We need to tell them she is lying. We need to release the video of her drinking tequila. No, I said. Moses listened to me. This is radioactive. She is painting you as a pervert. If this sticks, you won't just lose the house. You will lose your license. You will lose your legacy. They will come for your pension. They will come for the trust. Let them come, I said calmly. Moses, have you lost your mind? No, Saul. I have found my patience. Think about it. If I release the tequila video now, what does it prove? It proves she is a drunk. It proves she isn't pregnant. But it doesn't disprove the harassment. She will just say, she drank to numb the trauma of my abuse. She will spin it. Then what do we do? Saul demanded. We wait, I said. We let her talk. We let her do interviews. We let her go on every morning show that will have her. Why? Because of the law, Saul. You taught me this. Defamation per se. Malice. Damages. I walked back to the desk and sat down. Right now, she is lying to 50,000 people on Instagram. That is bad. But if she goes on Good Morning America, if she puts it in a sworn affidavit, if she raises money based on a verifiable lie, that is fraud, Saul whispered. That is felony fraud. Exactly, I said. And the damages. If she destroys my reputation globally, the settlement won't be a few $1,000s. It will be everything she will ever earn for the rest of her miserable life. I want you to record everything, Saul, every tweet, every video, every dollar that goes into that GoFundMe account. I want a ledger of her lies. But Moses, the press. I am not going downstairs, Saul. I have room service. I have books. Let them stand in the cold. Let them shout. The louder they scream now, the harder they will fall when I pull the rug out. I hung up the phone. I watched the news that night. They ran the story. Respected doctor accused of misconduct by daughter-in-law. They showed my picture, a photo from the hospital website where I looked stern and serious. They juxtaposed it with a photo of Jessica looking tearful and soft. The visual language was clear. I was the villain. David was nowhere to be seen in the coverage. He was hiding. He knew the truth. He knew I had never touched her, but he was too cowardly to clear my name. His silence was his signature on her lie. The next morning, the GoFundMe had reached $20,000. Jessica posted a thank you video. She looked better. She had her hair done. She was smiling through her tears. But then the first crack appeared. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the lawyers. It was capitalism. I was monitoring Jessica's social media feeds on my iPad. She had a partnership with a company called Pure Glow, a skincare brand that prided itself on clean living and family values. They were her biggest sponsor. They paid her $5,000 a month to hold their bottles and smile. At 2 p.m, Jessica was live again, unboxing gifts from fans. Suddenly, her phone pinged. She glanced at it. Her face changed. The smile dropped like a stone. She tried to recover. Oh, just a boring email, she laughed nervously. Anyway, look at this cute candle. But I saw the panic in her eyes. I checked my email. Saul had BCC'd me on a letter he sent to Pure Glow's legal department an hour ago. It was a simple letter. It didn't threaten them. It just informed them that their brand ambassador was currently under investigation for filing a false police report and fraud, and that any funds paid to her might be subject to clawback in a future civil suit. Corporations are like deer. They spook easily. 10 minutes later, Jessica abruptly ended the live stream. I hacked into the house cameras again. Jessica was in the kitchen. She was screaming. She was throwing a bottle of Pure Glow lotion against the wall. It exploded, sending white cream splattering across the cabinets. "They dropped me!" she shrieked. "David! They dropped me!" David ran into the room. "Who Pure Glow?" They sent a termination notice. They said, "I am a liability." They said, "The nature of the allegations doesn't align with their brand safety guidelines, but you are the victim," David stammered. "Why would they drop the victim?" "Because it is messy," Jessica yelled. "Brands hate messy. That was $5,000 a month." "How are we going to pay the lawyer?" "Use the GoFundMe money," David said. "We can't," Jessica cried. GoFundMe put a hold on the funds pending verification of the claims. Someone reported it as fraud. I smiled in my hotel room. That someone was Saul. "They are attacking my income, David." Jessica paced the kitchen, pulling at her hair. "This isn't fair. I made up a good story. People loved it." "Why is this happening?" David stood there, useless as always. Maybe we went too far, Jess. Maybe accusing him of that was too much. It was the only way she snapped. But now I have to go bigger. "What do you mean? If the brands won't support me, the media will. I need an interview. A real one. Not just Instagram. I need to get on TV. If I cry on national television, they won't be able to touch me." She picked up her phone. She started dialing. I watched her. She was doubling down. She was betting the farm on a hand she didn't hold. "Go ahead, Jessica," I whispered. "Get on TV. Make sure the lighting is perfect. Make sure the whole world sees you lie. Because when I play the tape of you getting drunk and mocking my death, I want the audience to be as big as possible." The smear campaign was working. It was destroying my name. But it was also building the trap. And Jessica, in her greed and desperation, was walking right into it. In medieval warfare, when you wanted to break a fortress, you didn't always need to batter down the walls with a ram. Sometimes you just had to cut off the water supply and wait. Thirst breaks a man faster than a sword. But in the 21st century, the most vital resource isn't water. It isn't even heat. For a generation raised on dopamine hits and instant validation, the oxygen they breathe is Wi-Fi. And I was the one with his hand on the valve. I sat in my hotel suite on a Tuesday morning. It was day 6 of the occupation. The legal papers had been served, the bank accounts were frozen, but David and Jessica were still dug in like ticks. They were surviving on pantry staples, but their spirits were surprisingly high because Jessica had pivoted. She was using the victim narrative to beg for donations. She was live streaming 3 times a day, painting me as a monster to keep the sympathy dollars flowing into her hidden Venmo account. I picked up the phone and dialed the customer service number for the cable and internet provider. "Thank you for calling Xfinity. How can I help you?" "This is Dr. Moses Carter," I said. "Account number 849221. I am the property owner. I would like to suspend all services immediately." The representative hesitated. "Sir, are you sure we show high data usage on that line? It looks like a business account." "It isn't a business," I said dryly. "It is a nursery for lies." "Cut it." I hung up. Then I opened my iPad to watch the show. It was 10 in the morning. Prime time for influencers. Jessica was in the living room. She had set up her ring light, which was now powered by an extension cord because she had moved the furniture around. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor wearing an oversized sweater, looking tearful. David was at the dining table. He had his laptop open. He was typing furiously. He had told Jessica he was working on a freelance consulting project that would save them. I knew it was a lie. David hadn't had a consulting gig in 2 years. He was probably playing solitaire or browsing Reddit. Jessica started her stream. "Hi guys," she whispered into her phone. "I just wanted to update you. It has been so hard. We are running low on food. David is working so hard to keep us afloat, but his father..." Suddenly she stopped. She tapped her phone screen. She frowned. She tapped it again. "David," she asked, "is the Wi-Fi down?" David didn't look up. "Probably just a glitch, babe. It happens." "No," Jessica said, her voice rising. "The stream cut out. It says reconnecting." She stood up. She walked over to the router in the corner. She stared at the lights. Usually they were a comforting, steady green. Now the internet light was blinking an angry, desolate orange, and the online light was completely dark. She rebooted it. She waited. "Orange. David," she screamed. "Fix it!" David sighed. He walked over and fiddled with the cords. He unplugged it. He plugged it back in. He did the universal dance of the technologically illiterate. "Nothing." "I can't get a signal," David muttered. Jessica's face went white. "You don't understand. I had 3,000 people watching. I was just about to drop the link for the donation fund. If I go offline, the algorithm punishes me. They will forget about us." David looked at his own laptop. "Oh, God." "What?" Jessica asked. "My meeting." David lied. "I have a pitch meeting with a client in Tokyo in 5 minutes. If I miss it, we lose the contract. That is $10,000, Jess." I laughed in my hotel room. There was no client in Tokyo. There was no contract. He was panicking because he couldn't pretend to be busy anymore. Without the screen to hide behind, he was just an unemployed man sitting in a cold house with a furious wife. "Call the company," Jessica shrieked. David pulled out his phone. "I have no signal," he said. "We cut the cell plan to save money. Remember? We are Wi-Fi only." Jessica looked at her phone. It was a brick, a useless slab of glass and metal. Without the internet, she wasn't an influencer. She was just a woman talking to herself in an empty room. She paced the floor. She looked like a junkie going through withdrawal. Her hands were shaking. "We need internet," she hissed. "I need to post. I need to tell them what he is doing to us." She ran to the window. She looked out at the street. "The Johnsons," she said. "Next door. They have fiber." So David asked. "So go get it," Jessica yelled. David looked confused. "Go get it how? Go outside. Sit in the bushes. Find their signal. You have that packet sniffer software you used to brag about, don't you?" "That was college, Jess. That was 10 years ago, and it is 10 degrees outside." "I don't care." Jessica grabbed his laptop and shoved it into his chest. "Go. If you don't get me online in 5 minutes, David, I swear to God I will leave you. I will walk out that door and find a man who can provide basic utilities." David looked at her. He saw the madness in her eyes. He knew she meant it. To her, the internet was life. He put on his coat, the same coat I had given him for Christmas 3 years ago. He put on a hat. He grabbed the laptop. He walked out the front door. I switched the camera feed to the exterior security cam. I watched my son, a 30-year-old man, a graduate of a private university, creep across his own front lawn. He hunched over, trying to make himself small. He waded through the snow to the hedge that separated my property from the Johnsons' house. The Johnsons were a nice couple. Retired teachers. Very vigilant. They were the head of the neighborhood watch. David crouched down behind the hydrangea bush. He opened the laptop. The blue light from the screen illuminated his face, making him look ghoulish in the shadows. He started typing, trying to guess their password or find an open guest network. He was shivering. His fingers were stiff. He looked pathetic. I could have stopped there. I could have just let him freeze. But the lesson wasn't finished. I picked up the hotel phone. I didn't call the police. I called the Johnsons. "Hello, Martha," I said when she answered. "It is Moses. Moses. Oh my goodness, we were so worried. We heard the rumors. Jessica said you attacked her, Martha." "You know me," I said gently. "I would never hurt a fly. I am safe. I am staying at a hotel. But listen, I am checking my security cameras remotely. Yes, I see a man lurking in the bushes between our houses. He has a computer. He looks like he is trying to hack into your system, or maybe he is casing the place for a burglary, with the economy the way it is." "Oh my heavens," Martha gasped. "Is it a stranger?" "He is wearing a mask and a hat," I said. "I can't be sure. But he is crouching right under your dining room window." "I am calling 911 right now," Martha said. I hung up. I watched the screen. David was still typing. He was probably trying password 123 or Johnson family. He was so focused on the screen he didn't see the blue lights reflect off the snow. A patrol car rolled up silently. 2 officers stepped out. They didn't use the siren. They unholstered their tasers. They approached the bushes from both sides. "Hey!" one officer shouted. "Let me see your hands!" David screamed. He jumped up, throwing the laptop into the snow. It landed face down the screen, cracking audibly. "Don't shoot!" David yelled, putting his hands up. "I live here! I live right there!" The officers grabbed him. They spun him around and pushed him against the Johnsons' brick wall. "If you live there, why are you hiding in your neighbor's bushes at 11 in the morning?" the officer asked. I... David stammered. He looked at my house. He saw Jessica watching from the window. She didn't come out. She didn't open the door to defend him. She just watched her face, a mask of disappointment. "I was trying to get Wi-Fi." David whispered, his head hanging low in shame. "My internet is cut off." The officer laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "You are stealing Wi-Fi, sir. How old are you?" 30, David mumbled. "And you are prowling around in the snow like a peeping Tom to steal a signal. Do you know how creepy that looks?" The homeowners are terrified. "It is a misunderstanding," David cried. "Please, just let me go inside." The officer patted him down. He found nothing but a wallet with no money and a phone with no signal. "Look, buddy," the officer said, releasing him. "I am not going to arrest you for being pathetic, but if we come back here, if Mrs. Johnson calls us again, you are going downtown for trespassing and digital theft. Get inside your house and pay your damn bill." David picked up his broken laptop. He walked back across the lawn. He walked with the heavy, dragging steps of a man who has lost his dignity. He opened the front door. I switched back to the interior camera. Jessica met him in the hallway. She looked at the cracked laptop. She looked at his snowy coat. "Did you get the password?" she asked. David looked at her. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just looked incredibly tired. "No, Jess," he said softly. "I didn't get the password." "Then what good are you?" she sneered. She turned around and walked back into the silent living room. David stood there. The house was quiet. No TV, no internet, no distractions. Just the sound of the wind outside and the crushing reality of who he had married. I sipped my tea. Utility warfare is effective. It strips away the noise. It forces people to look at each other in the stark, silent light of day. And what David was seeing finally was that he was alone. I checked my watch. Lunchtime. I wondered what they would eat now that they couldn't Google food banks near me. The siege continued. Hunger changes a man. It sharpens his instincts, but it dulls his morality. When the stomach is empty, the conscience goes silent. But David and Jessica weren't hungry for bread. They had rice, they had beans, they had clean water. No, they were hungry for something far more dangerous. They were hungry for status. They were starving for the illusion of control. And that kind of hunger makes people do stupid, irreversible things. It was night 7 of the siege. I watched from my hotel room as the desperation in my house reached a fever pitch. The internet was gone. The credit cards were dead. The heating was still on, but the atmosphere was glacial. Jessica was pacing the living room like a caged tiger. She had been unable to stream for 24 hours. Her audience was forgetting her. Her brand was dying. She turned to David. He was sitting on the floor, staring at the wall. "Do something," she hissed. "I can't," David said. "I have tried everything." "You haven't tried The Office," she said. David looked up. "The Office." "His office," Jessica said, pointing to the ceiling. "The door you broke down to get the deed. You didn't look properly. Old men hide cash, David. They hide gold. My grandfather kept $10,000 in a coffee can. Go look." David hesitated. "That is stealing, Jess." "It is survival," she screamed. "Do you want me to starve? Do you want to lose this house? If we find cash, we can hire a lawyer. We can fight the eviction. Go." David stood up. He looked defeated, but he obeyed. He walked up the stairs. I switched the camera feed to my office. The door was still hanging off its hinges from his previous assault. David walked in. He started pulling books off the shelves. He shook them, looking for hidden bills. Nothing. He opened the filing cabinets. Nothing but medical records and tax returns. Then his eyes landed on the bottom drawer of my mahogany desk. It was locked. He didn't look for a key. He went to the garage and came back with a crowbar. I flinched as I watched him jam the metal bar into the wood of my antique desk. That desk had belonged to my mentor at the hospital. It was a piece of history. David splintered it in seconds. He yanked the drawer open. There was no cash inside. I don't keep cash in the house. I trust banks. But there was a box. A long, velvet-covered box. David pulled it out. He opened the lid. Inside sat 6 watches. They weren't just timepieces. They were milestones. There was the Patek Philippe I bought when I became chief of staff. There was the Omega Speedmaster I bought when I published my first research paper. And right in the center, resting on a white cushion, was the Rolex Submariner. It was a 1990 model, stainless steel, black dial. It wasn't the most expensive watch in the box, but it was the only one that mattered. Sarah had given it to me on our 25th anniversary. She had saved for 3 years to buy it. She had presented it to me at dinner, her eyes shining with pride. David picked it up. He didn't look at the craftsmanship. He didn't feel the weight of the history. He saw a price tag. Rolex, he whispered. He grabbed the whole box. He ran downstairs. "Look!" he shouted, running into the kitchen. "Look what I found." Jessica's eyes lit up. She grabbed the Rolex. "Is it real?" "Of course it is real," David said. "Dad never bought fakes." "How much is it worth?" she asked, turning it over in her hands. "I don't know. 5 grand, maybe 10. "Sell it," Jessica said instantly. David froze. "Sell it." "Jess, this is his collection. If I sell it, that is." That is what Jessica challenged. That is justice. He owes us David. He cut us off. He left us to rot. This is just back pay. Take it to a pawn shop. Get cash. Tonight. David looked at the watch. He looked at Jessica. "Okay," he said. He put on his coat. He put the watches in a plastic grocery bag, a fitting indignity for such fine instruments, and walked out into the night. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I wanted him to complete the act. Attempted theft is a misdemeanor. Selling stolen goods is a felony. I needed him to cross the line so far he could never come back. David drove my old sedan, the one I let him use, to the south side of the city. He didn't go to a reputable jeweler. He was too scared of being asked questions. He went to a place called Midway Gold and Loan. It was a small, grimy shop with bars on the windows and a neon sign that buzzed incessantly. He thought he was anonymous there. He thought he was just another face in the city. He didn't know that the owner of Midway Gold and Loan was a man named Tony Russo. Tony was 70 years old. He was a gruff, no-nonsense man who had run that shop for 40 years. And 30 years ago, Tony had been a patient in my ward. He had a necrotizing infection in his leg. The other doctors wanted to amputate. I spent 6 hours in surgery, debriding the wound, saving the muscle, saving the leg. Tony walked out of that hospital on 2 feet because of me. We played poker every 3rd Thursday of the month. I picked up my phone and dialed Tony's private cell number. "Tony," I said. "It is Moses," Doc Tony asked, surprised. "I saw the news. Are you okay? That daughter-in-law of yours is a piece of work." "I am fine, Tony. But listen. My son is walking into your shop in about 2 minutes. He is carrying a bag of watches. He is stealing your watches." Tony sounded disgusted. "Yes, he is going to try to sell them." "Do you want me to throw him out?" Tony asked. "Or maybe lock the doors and call the cops?" "No," I said. "I want you to buy them." "What?" "Buy them, Tony. But lowball him. Insult him with the price. Make him sign the receipt. Make him give you his driver's license. I need the paper trail, Tony. I need proof that he completed the transaction." I heard the bell on Tony's shop door ring in the background. "He is here," Tony whispered. "Hold on, Doc. I will leave the line open." I listened. I heard David's footsteps approaching the counter. "Help you?" Tony's voice was rough, professional. "Yeah," David said. His voice was shaky. He was nervous. I have some items I want to sell. Inheritance. Inheritance." He was already burying me. David dumped the bag onto the counter. The watches clattered against the glass. Tony whistled. "Nice collection. Rolex. Patek. Where did you say you got these?" "My father." David lied. "He passed away. Left them to me. I need the cash for the funeral." I closed my eyes in my hotel room. The funeral. He was selling my wife's gift to pay for a funeral that wasn't happening to feed a wife who despised him. Tony hummed. "Let me take a look." I heard the sound of a jeweler's loop clicking. "This Submariner," Tony said. "It is a 1990 model, good condition." He paused. "There is an engraving on the back," Tony said. David sounded surprised. Is there? I never looked. To Moses. Love Sarah. 1990. Forever. Tony read it out loud. Yeah, that is him, David said quickly. Moses. My dad. Tony was silent for a long moment. I knew he was fighting the urge to jump over the counter and strangle the boy. Tony loved Sarah. He had cried at her funeral. Okay, Tony said, his voice tight. I can take them. But the market is soft right now. Nobody is buying luxury watches in a pandemic. How much? David asked. $500 for the lot. David gasped. 500? Are you kidding? The Rolex alone is worth 5,000. Not without papers, Kid Tony lied smoothly. No box, no papers, personalized engraving. It is scrap parts. 500 cash. Take it or leave it. David hesitated. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about Jessica screaming at him. He was thinking about the empty refrigerator. He was thinking that $500 could buy groceries and maybe a cheap lawyer consultation. Fine, David said. I will take it. Need your ID, Tony said. State law. I heard the slap of David's license on the counter. I heard the scratching of a pen. Here is your cash, Tony said. Don't spend it all in one place. Thanks, David muttered. The doorbell rang again as David left. Tony came back to the phone. Doc, are you there? I am here, Tony. He took it, Tony said. He took $500 for a collection worth 50 grand. He sold your wife's watch for grocery money. You got the license I asked. I made a photocopy. I got his signature. I got him on video clear as day. Hold on to it, Tony. The police will be there in the morning to collect the evidence. You are pressing charges, grand larceny, I said. Theft over $10,000. Class 2 felony. Good, Tony said. That kid, he has got dead eyes, Doc. I wouldn't trust him with a stray cat. Keep the watches in the safe, Tony. I will come get them when this is over. They are safe with me, Doc. Always. I hung up. I looked at the iPad. David was driving home. He probably felt triumphant. He had $500 in his pocket. He was going to walk in the door and be the provider. He was going to throw the cash on the table and demand Jessica's respect. He didn't know he had just sold his freedom for $500. He didn't know that by signing that pawn slip he had signed a confession. He had proven intent. He had proven possession. And he had proven that he was willing to desecrate his mother's memory for a quick buck. I stood up and poured the rest of my tea down the sink. Jessica wanted to play the victim fine. But David had just become a criminal, and I wasn't going to treat him like a son anymore. I was going to treat him like a perpetrator. The night thief had struck, but he forgot that the house he robbed belonged to a man who installed the alarm system himself. You can attack a man's reputation, and he might stay silent. You can steal his watch, and he might wait for the law to handle it. But when you threaten public health, when you sell poison to vulnerable people and call it a cure, you are no longer just an enemy. You are a pathogen. And as the former chief of infection control, I have spent my entire life eradicating pathogens. Jessica thought her biggest problem was the eviction notice or the frozen bank accounts. She didn't realize that while she was playing checkers with her social media followers, I was playing three-dimensional chess with the federal government. 6 months ago, long before the pandemic started, I had grown suspicious of the pills Jessica was selling. She called them the Pure Glow Detox System. She claimed they were an ancient herbal blend sourced from the mountains of Peru. She sold them for $80 a bottle to young mothers and insecure teenagers who wanted to look like her. I didn't trust her. I didn't trust the packaging, which had no FDA approval seal. So, I did what any responsible scientist would do. I stole a bottle from her inventory in the garage. I took it to my old lab at the hospital. I ran it through the mass spectrometer. The results were terrifying. There were no ancient herbs in those pills, but there was plenty of lead and mercury and a dangerous level of unlisted laxatives. The lead levels were 500 times the legal limit. She wasn't detoxing her customers. She was slowly poisoning them with heavy metals. I had held on to the report. I wasn't sure what to do with it at the time. David was happy, or so I thought, and I didn't want to destroy his marriage over a scam. But now the gloves were off. I had sent the full toxicology report along with samples of the product and Jessica's shipping records to the regional office of the Food and Drug Administration. I attached a cover letter signed by Dr. Moses Carter, MD, outlining the immediate danger to the public. The FDA does not move fast for paperwork, but they move at the speed of light for lead poisoning. It was Wednesday morning, day 8 of the siege. I was watching the camera feed. The mood in the house was grim. David was sitting at the table staring at the $500 he had gotten for the watches. He looked guilty. He looked sick. Jessica was ignoring him frantically, trying to mix a batch of her new immunity booster powder in the kitchen, hoping to sell it for cash on the black market since her website was down. Then came the knock. It wasn't the rhythmic knock of the police. It was a heavy, persistent pounding. Jessica jumped. She looked at the door. "Is that the police again?" she hissed. "Did you sell the watches? Did they catch you?" David shook his head, his face pale. "No, I don't know." The pounding continued. "Open the door." "Federal agents." Jessica dropped the spoon. "Federal." She ran to the window. I switched to the exterior view. It wasn't a patrol car. It was 3 black SUVs. Men and women in blue windbreakers with yellow letters on the back were swarming the porch. FDA, OCI, Office of Criminal Investigations. They didn't wait for David to open the door. They had a warrant. I heard the sound of a battering ram hitting my beautiful oak door. 1 hit. The lock I had installed 30 years ago held. 2 hits. The wood splintered. 3 hits. The door flew open. 6 agents stormed into the hallway, guns drawn but lowered. They weren't looking for a fugitive. They were looking for evidence. "Hands visible," the lead agent shouted. David threw his hands up, backing into the kitchen counter. Jessica stood frozen, her hands covered in white powder. "What is happening?" Jessica screamed. "Who are you?" Special Agent Holloway, FDA, the lead agent announced. He holstered his weapon and pulled out a piece of paper. "We have a federal warrant to search these premises for misbranded drugs, adulterated supplements, and evidence of wire fraud." Jessica laughed. It was a high, hysterical sound. "Drugs? We don't do drugs. We are wellness influencers." "I sell vitamins." Agent Holloway looked at her with pure disgust. "We tested your vitamins, Mrs. Carter. They contain enough lead to kill a horse. You are selling toxic waste and calling it a cleanse." He turned to his team. "Secure the garage. That is where the inventory is. Seize all electronics. Seize all shipping labels." "No." Jessica shrieked. She threw herself in front of the hallway leading to the garage. "You can't go in there. That is my inventory. That is my money. That is $50,000 worth of product." 2 female agents grabbed her. They didn't treat her like a celebrity. They treated her like a suspect. They pulled her arms behind her back and cuffed her. "You are under arrest," Jessica Carter, Agent Holloway said, "for the introduction of adulterated food into interstate commerce and felony fraud." They dragged her to the living room couch and sat her down. I watched as the agents formed a line. They went into the garage. They came out carrying boxes, hundreds of them. The shiny pink boxes of Pure Glow Detox, the inventory Jessica had bragged about, the inventory she had bought with David's credit cards, the inventory she was counting on to save them from eviction. They carried it all out to the SUVs. David stood in the kitchen watching. He didn't move. He didn't try to stop them. He looked at Jessica, then he looked at the agents carrying the boxes of poison. "Lead," David whispered. Agent Holloway stopped near him. "Your wife has been poisoning people for 2 years, son. We have reports of 3 teenagers in Wisconsin hospitalized with kidney failure after taking this stuff. Did you know?" David shook his head violently. No, I swear. She told me it was organic root powder. She said it was safe." Holloway looked at him for a long moment, deciding whether to cuff him too. "Stay out of the way," Holloway said finally. For the next hour, my house was dismantled. They took Jessica's laptop. They took her phone, the tool of her trade. They took the ring lights. They took the shipping scales. Jessica sat on the couch, sobbing. But she wasn't crying for the teenagers in Wisconsin with kidney failure. She was crying for the boxes. "My brand," she wailed. "You are destroying my brand." "Do you know how hard I worked for this?" "Shut up," Holloway snapped. "You don't have a brand anymore, lady. You have a court date." When the house was stripped clean, Holloway stood in front of Jessica. "We are taking you in for processing. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." They hauled her up. She kicked and screamed, her heels dragging on my hardwood floor. "David," she yelled. "Do something. Stop them." David stood paralyzed in the kitchen. He looked at his wife, the woman he had sacrificed his father for the woman he had stolen for. And he saw her for what she truly was. A fraud, a danger, a criminal. "I can't stop the FDA, Jess," David whispered. "You coward," Jessica screamed, spit flying from her mouth as they dragged her out the broken front door. "You useless, spineless coward. You let your father ruin us, and now you are letting them take everything. I hate you. I should have married a man with a backbone." The door didn't close because the lock was broken, but the agents dragged her out into the snow anyway. They shoved her into the back of the SUV. David walked to the doorway. He watched the convoy drive away. He was alone. The house was silent. The inventory was gone. The money was gone. His wife was gone. He turned around and looked at the empty living room. The floor was muddy from the agent's boots. The door was shattered. The expensive furniture looked out of place in the wreckage. He walked over to the kitchen island. He saw the white powder Jessica had been mixing. The immunity booster. He picked up a handful of it. He let it slip through his fingers like sand. It was poison. All of it. His marriage was poison. His choices were poison. I sat in my hotel room. I should have felt triumphant. The architect of my misery was in handcuffs. But I didn't feel joy. I felt a deep, exhausting sadness. I picked up the phone and called Saul. "She is in custody," I said. "I know," Saul said. "I just got the alert. The bail will be set high. She is a flight risk." "Good," I said. "Keep her there." "What about David?" Saul asked. "They didn't take him." "No," I said. "They didn't. He is not a kingpin. He is just a fool." "Moses," Saul said gently. "He is alone in that house. The heat is on, but everything else is gone. He has no food. He has no money." I looked at the screen. David was sitting on the floor in the kitchen, his head on his knees, weeping. "Let him sit," I said. "But Moses, he needs to sit in the ruins, Saul. He needs to look at the empty space where his life used to be. That is the only way he learns." I hung up. I walked to the window. The snow had stopped falling. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. Jessica was gone. But the final act wasn't over. There was one more meeting to attend, one more truth to deliver. I packed my bag. It was time to go home. The 30 days were up. In the legal world, a deadline is not a suggestion. It is a cliff edge. And at 9 o'clock on the morning of the 30th day, I stood at the edge of my property line, ready to push them off. I wasn't alone. Officer Miller was there, his face grim, his hand resting near his belt. Saul was there carrying a briefcase that contained enough paper to crush a man. And behind us was a locksmith ready to change the tumblers the moment the house was empty. The house looked tired. The front lawn was overgrown. The window where David had broken the laptop was boarded up with plywood. It looked like a foreclosure. It looked like a place where hope had packed its bags and left. We didn't knock. The door was unlocked. We walked into the hallway, the air stale and smelling of unwashed clothes and desperation. They were in the living room. David and Jessica were sitting on the couch. They looked like two survivors of a shipwreck who had washed up on a deserted island only to realize there was no food. Jessica had made bail 3 days ago. Her parents had put up their house to get her out, but she had nowhere else to go, so she had crawled back here to the scene of the crime to wait out the clock. She looked ghastly. Her skin was a sallow, yellowish gray. Her hair was thinning, clumps of it coming out in her hairbrush. She was wrapped in a blanket, trembling. David looked hollow. He sat with his head in his hands, staring at the floor. He didn't look up when we entered. "Good morning," I said. My voice was calm. It filled the room, chasing away the silence. David flinched. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Dad," he whispered. Jessica slowly raised her head. The fire was gone from her eyes, replaced by a dull, glassy look of sickness. But the manipulation, that was still there. It was hardwired into her DNA. "You," she rasped. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You did this," she wheezed. "Look at me. I am dying." I stood in the center of the room, unbuttoning my coat. Saul stood silently behind me, a sentinel of justice. "You aren't dying, Jessica," I said. "You are evicted. There is a difference." "I am sick," she cried, her voice cracking. "I have been sick since the day you left. It is long COVID. That is what the doctors on the internet say. Brain fog, hair loss, tremors. You gave it to me. You were the carrier. You walked into this house with your hospital germs and you infected me, and now my body is shutting down." She started to cry. It was a pitiful sound. I survived the miscarriage you caused, she sobbed, continuing the lie even now. But this virus, it is eating me alive. And you don't even care. You are kicking a disabled woman out onto the street. David looked at me. Dad, she really is sick. Look at her hair. She throws up every morning. Maybe she was right. Maybe you did bring something home. I looked at my son. Even now, after she had lied about the pregnancy, after she had been arrested for fraud, he was still trying to find a way to make it my fault. He needed me to be the villain so he didn't have to be the fool. I looked at Saul. The file, please. Saul handed me a thick manila folder. I walked over to the coffee table. I swept away the empty takeout containers and the piles of unpaid bills. I slammed the file down. The sound made Jessica jump. I am a doctor, Jessica, I said. And unlike your internet friends, I believe in diagnostics. I opened the file. When the FDA raided this house, they didn't just take your inventory. They took samples. And because I am the one who tipped them off, and because I was concerned about the environmental contamination of my property, I received a copy of the toxicology report. I pulled out a sheet of paper covered in red graphs. You don't have long COVID, Jessica. You have never had COVID. You tested negative 3 times in the jail infirmary. Then what is it? David asked, looking at the paper. Why is she falling apart? I looked at Jessica. She was staring at the file, her eyes widening. You are your own best customer, aren't you, Jessica? I asked. You didn't just sell those pills. You took them. You took the mega dose every morning because you believed your own marketing. You thought they would make you glow. I pointed to the graph. Mercury, lead, arsenic. David gasped. What? Your wife isn't suffering from a viral infection, David. She is suffering from acute heavy metal poisoning. The hair loss. That is the thallium. The tremors. That is the mercury destroying her nervous system. The vomiting. That is her body trying to purge the lead she has been swallowing for 2 years. I looked at Jessica. You poisoned yourself, I said. You were so obsessed with detoxing that you turned your own body into a toxic waste dump. You are literally rotting from the inside out because of your own greed. Jessica stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at her hands, watching the tremors in her fingers, finally understanding that the enemy wasn't me. The enemy was the bottle of pink powder she drank every morning. David looked at her with horror. He scooted away from her on the couch. You took the pills, David whispered. You told me they were safe. You told the FDA you didn't know I thought they were. Jessica shrieked. It was the supplier. They lied to me. No, I cut in. You lied to everyone. You knew the supplier was a basement lab in a country with no regulations. You chose them because they were cheap. You chose profit over safety, and now you are paying the price with your own kidneys. David put his head in his hands. Oh my God. But we aren't done, I said. I turned to David. You look surprised that your wife is a fraud, David, but you shouldn't be, because deception seems to be the love language of this marriage. David looked up. What do you mean? I held out my hand to Saul. The second file, please. Saul handed me a blue folder. David went pale. He recognized the logo on the front. It was the logo of the logistics company he used to work for, the job he claimed he lost because of the pandemic. For 6 months, I said, opening the file, you have been telling me and Jessica that you were laid off. You said the pandemic crushed the supply chain. You said you were a victim of the economy. You sat in this house playing video games in the basement, pretending to look for work, letting me pay the bills because you were down on your luck. I pulled out a termination letter. It was dated November of 2018, 2 years ago. You weren't laid off in the pandemic, David. You were fired 2 years ago. Jessica stopped shaking. She turned her head slowly to look at David. 2 years, she whispered. You told me you were a VP. You told me you were working from home. David stammered. I was consulting. I held up the letter. Reason for termination: gross misconduct, embezzlement of corporate funds. The room went deadly silent. You didn't lose your job, son. You were caught stealing. You were using the company credit card to pay for Jessica's business trips to Miami and Tulum. You stole $40,000 from your employer. I tossed the letter onto the table next to the toxicology report. They didn't press charges because your boss liked me, David. He called me. He told me he wouldn't send you to jail if you paid it back. So I paid it back. I paid the $40,000. I saved you from prison 2 years ago, and I never told you. I wanted you to have a fresh start." David looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "You knew, I always know," I said. "I waited for you to tell me. I waited for you to be a man and admit you messed up, but instead you lied. You pretended to go to work every day. You pretended to be a victim. And when the money got tight, instead of getting a job at a grocery store or driving a truck, you threw me out into the snow to steal my house." Jessica started to laugh. It was a manic, broken sound. "You are broke," she screeched at David. "You have been broke for 2 years. I was trying to fix it," David yelled at her. "I was trying to keep you happy. You spend $5,000 a month on clothes because I thought you had a salary," Jessica screamed. "You liar! You pathetic little liar!" I stood over them. The toxic wife and the thief husband, they deserved each other. They were a perfect circle of deceit. "That is enough," I said. My voice was like a gavel. I looked at the clock. "It is 9:15. You have 15 minutes to get out." "Dad," David pleaded, "please." "Where are we supposed to go? Jessica needs a doctor." "Then take her to the emergency room," I said. "But not Mercy. Go to county." "And David." He looked at me. "Don't use my last name when you check in. You have dragged it through the mud enough." I turned to Officer Miller. "Officer, if they are not on the other side of that sidewalk in 15 minutes, arrest them for trespassing." I walked out of the living room. I didn't look back. I walked into the kitchen, my kitchen. I opened the window to let the fresh, cold air in. I needed to breathe. I needed to clear the stench of their lies out of my lungs. Behind me, I heard the sounds of shouting, the sounds of blame, and finally the sounds of shuffling feet dragging luggage across the floor. The showdown was over. The truth was out, and it was uglier than any virus. But at least now the house was clean. The sound of a suitcase zipper closing is usually the sound of a journey beginning. It is the sound of vacations, of business trips, of new chapters. But in my hallway, under the cold, watchful eyes of Officer Miller and my attorney, the sound of the zipper was the sound of a life collapsing. It was a sharp, final rasp that signaled the end of the occupation. 15 minutes is not a long time. It is enough time to drink a cup of coffee. It is enough time to read a newspaper. But it is barely enough time to pack 30 years of entitlement into a duffel bag. David and Jessica moved with the frantic, jerky motions of animals caught in a trap. They threw random things into trash bags. Jessica, still trembling from the revelation of her self-poisoning, clutched a designer handbag that was now worthless to her. David grabbed a handful of socks, dropping half of them on the floor. Officer Miller checked his watch. He didn't look at it quickly. He looked at it with a deliberate, theatrical slowness. "Time is up," Miller announced. His voice boomed off the hardwood floors. David stopped. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs holding a plastic bag filled with T-shirts. He looked at the door, then he looked at the window. Outside, the Chicago winter had decided to remind us of its power. The sky had turned a bruised, angry purple. The wind was howling again, rattling the panes of glass in their frames. Snow was falling in thick, heavy sheets, erasing the world in a wash of white. It was a blizzard. A real one. The kind that shuts down airports and freezes car engines. Officer Miller opened the front door. The wind shrieked into the hallway, carrying with it a spray of ice crystals. The temperature in the foyer dropped 10 degrees in a heartbeat. "Let's go, folks," Miller said. "You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here." Jessica walked toward the door. She looked like a ghost. She was wrapped in her coat, but she moved as if she were already frozen. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at David. She just walked out into the storm, accepting her fate with the numbness of the heavily medicated. But David didn't move. He stared at the open door. He stared at the swirling snow. The cold air hit his face, and I saw the terror seize him. He wasn't looking at the weather. He was looking at his future. He dropped the bag of clothes. It hit the floor with a soft thud. He turned to me. His face was crumpled wet with tears and snot. He didn't look 30 years old. He looked 5. He looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But I wasn't his protector anymore. I was his landlord. "Dad," he whispered. I stood still, my hands clasped behind my back. I didn't answer. David took a step toward me, then another, and then his legs gave out. He collapsed. He didn't faint. He fell to his knees. He crawled the last 2 feet across the floorboards he had walked on his entire life, and he wrapped his arms around my legs. He buried his face in my trousers. He was sobbing a deep, guttural sound of pure despair. "Dad, please," he choked out. "You can't do this." "Look outside." I looked down at the top of his head. His hair was thinning just like mine. "It is a blizzard." "Dad," David cried, tightening his grip on my legs. "There is a storm warning. The shelters are full. We have no money. The car is low on gas. If you throw us out there, we will freeze. We have nowhere to go." He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, pleading, begging for the mercy he had never shown me. "I am your son," he whispered. "Please, just one more night. Just let us sleep on the floor. I will sleep in the garage. I don't care. Just don't put me out in the snow." The snow. The word triggered something in my brain. A synapse fired, sending a jolt of memory through my nervous system. The room faded. The warmth of the central heating vanished. Suddenly, I wasn't standing in the hallway in my suit. I was standing on the porch wearing thin flannel pajamas. It was dark. My slippers were soaked. The wind was cutting through my skin like 1,000 razor blades. I could feel the numbness creeping up my fingers. I could feel the terror of looking down an empty, frozen street, knowing that the only people in the world who were supposed to love me had just locked the deadbolt. I remembered the sound of the lock clicking, that final metallic sound that told me I was garbage. I remembered the walk to the bus stop, the shivering, the hallucinations of my dead wife calling me home. I remembered the feeling of my heart slowing down, preparing to stop forever. I looked down at David. He was warm. He was wearing a sweater. He was inside. I reached down. I didn't hug him. I grabbed his shoulders. My grip was iron. I pulled him off my legs. "Get up," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was the voice of a surgeon telling a patient the limb has to go. David scrambled to his feet, wiping his nose. You will let us stay." I looked him in the eye. I let the silence stretch out between us, heavy and suffocating. "Do you remember that night, David?" I asked. "Do you remember the Tuesday when you pushed me out that door?" David flinched. He looked at the floor. "Dad, I was scared." Jessica said. "I don't care what Jessica said," I interrupted. "You pushed me. You watched me fall into the snow. And when I begged you, when I told you I would die, do you remember what you did?" David didn't answer. He was shaking. "You slammed the door," I said. "You turned off the porch light. You left me in the dark." I stepped closer to him. He smelled of fear and stale sweat. That night, David, I had nowhere to go either. The hotels were closed. The neighbors were terrified. I had no phone. I had no wallet. I had nothing but the pajamas on my back. I pointed to the open door where the snow was swirling in a chaotic dance. "It was colder that night than it is right now," I said. David sobbed. "I know. I am sorry. I am so sorry. But do you know the difference between you and me?" I asked. He shook his head. "The difference," I said, "is that when I stood on that porch, stripped of everything, I still had something you have never possessed." I tapped his chest. I had dignity. I walked. I didn't crawl. I didn't beg the people who tried to kill me. I walked into the storm because I knew that dying on my feet was better than living on my knees. I looked at him with pity, deep, exhausting pity. "And look at you. You are on your knees. You are begging. You have no money, no job, no wife, and no pride. You are hollow, David." David stared at me. The truth hit him harder than the cold. He realized finally that he wasn't the victim. He was the failure. Officer Miller stepped forward. "Mr. Carter, do you want me to remove him?" I held up a hand. "Wait." I walked over to the closet near the door. The same closet David had raided to pack my bag that night. I opened it. I pushed past the expensive coats David had bought with my money. I reached into the back and pulled out an old garment. It was a heavy canvas work coat, Carhartt brown, frayed at the cuffs, stained with oil and paint. It was the coat I used to wear when I fixed the boiler in the basement. It wasn't stylish. It smelled like old grease. But it was warm. It was lined with thick wool. I walked back to David. He looked at the coat. He looked at me. I held it out to him. "Put it on," I said. David hesitated. "Dad, put it on," I commanded. He slipped his arms into the sleeves. It was too big for him. He swam in it. He looked like a child wearing his father's armor. I zipped it up to his chin. I smoothed the collar. "I am not you, David," I said softly. "I don't kill people to save myself." I stepped back. "This coat will keep you alive," I said. "It is more than you gave me. I am merciful." David looked down at the old stained coat. He touched the fabric. He realized that this dirty, oily jacket was the only inheritance he was ever going to get. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," I said. "Just go, before I change my mind." Officer Miller put a hand on David's shoulder. "Let's go, son." David turned. He walked toward the open door. He stepped over the threshold. The wind hit him. He hunched his shoulders, burying his face in the collar of my old coat. He looked back one last time. He looked at the warm hallway. He looked at the safe where the deed used to be. He looked at me. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stood there, a statue of judgment. He stepped out into the blizzard. Officer Miller grabbed the door handle. "I am sorry it had to end this way," Doc Miller said. "It didn't have to, Miller," I said. "They chose the weather." Miller nodded. He pulled the door shut. The heavy thud of the door closing was the exact inverse of the sound from 3 weeks ago. That time it was the sound of betrayal. This time it was the sound of justice. I heard the lock click. I was alone. The house was quiet. The wind howled outside, beating against the walls, searching for a way in. But the walls held. My walls held. I walked to the window. I parted the curtains just an inch. I saw 2 figures walking down the driveway. Jessica was ahead, struggling against the wind, not waiting for anyone. David was behind her, a small brown shape in the whiteout, wearing a coat that was too big for a man so small. They reached the street. They turned left. They disappeared into the storm. I let the curtain fall. I walked into the kitchen. I picked up the kettle. I filled it with water. I set it on the stove. I was going to make tea, and then I was going to sleep in my own bed under my own roof, safe and warm. The eviction was complete. The house was mine again. But as the water began to boil, I realized that the silence in the house wasn't empty. It was full. It was full of peace. The silence that followed the slamming of the front door was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was the heavy silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. David and Jessica were gone, swallowed by the snowstorm they had tried to weaponize against me. But even though their physical bodies were outside the threshold, their presence lingered in the house like a bad smell. I walked through the rooms of my home. The air felt stale. It smelled of Jessica's cloying synthetic perfume and the sour odor of David's fear. I looked at the leather sofa where Jessica had sat while she live-streamed her lies. I looked at the dining table where David had tried to steal my credit card information. I looked at the kitchen island where she had poisoned herself with heavy metals. I am a man of science. I spent 40 years in infection control. I know that some pathogens are airborne, some are bloodborne, and some settle into the very fabric of an environment. You cannot simply wash them away. You have to sterilize. I picked up the phone. I didn't call a maid service. I called a biohazard remediation company, the same crew we used at the hospital to clean up after infectious outbreaks. When they arrived wearing white Tyvek suits and respirators, I gave them a simple order. "Strip it," I said. I didn't mean the paint. I meant the memories. Everything Jessica had touched, everything David had claimed, the beige sectional sofa, the rug she had spilled wine on, the mattress in the guest room where they had slept, the curtains she had closed to keep the world out. "I want it gone," I told the foreman. "All of it. Don't donate it. Burn it. Or take it to the dump. I don't care. Just get it out of my sight." For 2 days, my house was a hive of activity. I watched as they hauled the furniture out into the snow. It looked like an exorcism. Piece by piece, the physical manifestations of their greed were removed. The house began to echo again. The floors were stripped, sanded, and refinished to remove the scuff marks of their carelessness. The walls were scrubbed with industrial-grade disinfectant. When they were finished, the house was empty. It smelled of bleach and lemon oil. It smelled clean. It smelled like 1980 the day I bought it. It was a blank slate. But a house is not a home if it is empty, and a castle is useless if it doesn't protect anyone. I stood in the empty living room looking out at the snowy street. The pandemic was raging. The news was filled with stories of hospitals at breaking point. Nurses were sleeping in their cars because they were terrified of going home and infecting their families. Doctors were renting garage spaces just to get a few hours of sleep away from their children. I thought about David. He had kicked me out because he lied about fearing infection. He had used the virus as a weapon of exclusion. I decided right then and there to use my house as a weapon of inclusion. I called the administrator at Mercy Hospital. "John," I said, "it is Moses." Moses. John sounded exhausted. "We are drowning here, Moses. We are out of beds. We are out of staff." "I know," I said. "Listen, I have a 5-bedroom brownstone just 10 minutes from the hospital. It is empty. It is warm. It has high-speed internet and a stocked kitchen." "What are you saying?" John asked. "I am saying send me your people," I said. "Send me the nurses who can't go home to their asthmatic parents. Send me the residents who are sleeping in the on-call room. I am turning my house into a sanctuary." John was silent for a moment. Then I heard him choke up. "You would do that." "I am doing it," I said. "Just tell them to bring their own sleeping bags until the new beds arrive." By that evening, my house was full again. But this time, it wasn't filled with influencers and parasites. It was filled with heroes. 3 ICU nurses took the upstairs bedrooms. 2 residents took the basement. They walked in looking like ghosts, their faces bruised from wearing N95 masks for 12 hours straight. When they saw the warm, clean space, when they smelled the pot of stew I had simmering on the stove, they cried. I didn't ask them for rent. I didn't ask them for gratitude. I just gave them a key and told them to sleep. For the next week, my house became a fortress of healing. I wasn't just a landlord. I was a caretaker again. I made coffee at 4 in the morning for the early shift. I washed scrubs. I listened to their stories of life and death. The house felt alive. It vibrated with a quiet, noble energy. It was the exact opposite of the toxicity David and Jessica had brought. They had consumed. These people contributed. They had taken. These people gave. But while I was rebuilding my sanctuary, the architects of my misery were learning what it meant to live without a foundation. I didn't have to guess what happened to them. Saul had hired a private investigator to keep tabs on them just in case they tried to come back. The reports were brief, brutal, and satisfying. David and Jessica didn't go to a shelter. They were too proud. They slept in David's car, a 3-year-old Honda Civic that was already 3 months behind on payments. They parked in a Walmart lot on the outskirts of the city. The first night they ran the engine for heat. By the second night they ran out of gas. They had $40 between them. That buys a tank of gas or food, but not both. Jessica's influencer veneer cracked instantly. Without her ring lights, without her filters, without a warm shower, the reality of her choices set in. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a homeless woman living in a freezing sedan with a man she didn't respect. The report said they fought constantly, screaming matches that fogged up the windows. Jessica blamed David for not fighting harder. David blamed Jessica for the lies about the pregnancy. They tore each other apart in that small, confined space. On the 5th day, the inevitable happened. Jessica met someone. She didn't meet him at a gala. She met him in the parking lot. A guy in a lifted truck who was parked a few rows over. He saw a pretty blonde woman in distress. He offered her a cigarette. Then he offered her a ride to a motel. Saul's investigator sent me a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance. It showed Jessica moving her 2 suitcases from David's Honda into the stranger's truck. She didn't look back. She didn't hug David goodbye. She just climbed into the passenger seat of a stranger's vehicle because it had heat and he had a credit card. She left David alone in the Honda. David sat there for 2 more days. The car battery died. The food ran out. He was wearing the old grease-stained Carhartt coat I had given him. It was the only thing keeping him from freezing to death. He had hit rock bottom. And when you hit the bottom, you reach for the only hand that has ever pulled you up. I was in the kitchen making sandwiches for the night shift nurses when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. David. The name flashed in white letters against the black background. The kitchen went quiet. One of the nurses, a young woman named Sarah God, that name followed me everywhere, looked up from her coffee. "Is everything okay, Dr. Carter?" she asked. I stared at the phone. It vibrated in my hand. I visualized him. I saw him sitting in that frozen car, his breath misting in the air, his fingers stiff as he dialed my number. I knew what he was going to say. He was going to apologize. He was going to say Jessica was gone. He was going to say he learned his lesson. He was going to ask to come home. He wanted the warmth back. He wanted the safety back. But safety is a privilege, not a right. And he had forfeited his privilege the night he locked that deadbolt. I thought about the night I walked in the snow. I thought about the hallucinations. I thought about Officer Miller finding me half dead. If I answered, I would be enabling him. If I answered, I would be telling him that betrayal has an expiration date. I looked at the nurse. "It is nothing, Sarah," I said. "Just a spam caller." I didn't decline the call. That would send him to voicemail, and he might leave a message that would haunt me. I pressed the volume button on the side of the phone to silence the ringer. Then I tapped the small I icon next to his name. I scrolled down to the bottom of the contact card. The letters were red. "Block this caller." I pressed it. A confirmation box popped up. "You will not receive phone calls, messages, or FaceTime from people on the block list." I pressed block contact. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. I put the phone back in my pocket. I picked up the knife and finished cutting the sandwich. David was alone in the cold, but he was wearing my coat. That was all the fathering I had left to give. I turned to the nurses. "Who wants turkey and who wants ham?" I asked. "Turkey, please." Sarah smiled. I handed her the plate. The kitchen was warm. The laughter returned. The house was full of life, and for the first time in years, the air was breathable. Order had been restored. The infection was gone. And the quarantine was finally truly over. 1 year is a long time in the life of a virus, but it is a short time in the life of a garden. The tulips I planted the spring after the eviction were finally blooming. They stood tall and red against the black wrought iron fence, a testament to patience and resilience. I sat at the small patio table in the backyard. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon in May. The air was sweet with the scent of freshly cut grass and lilac. Across from me sat Officer Miller. He wasn't wearing his uniform today. He was wearing a Chicago Bulls t-shirt and grilling an apron that said, "Grill Sergeant." We were playing chess. It had become our weekly ritual. He was a decent player, aggressive with his knights, but he lacked the foresight of a man who had spent 40 years anticipating microscopic mutations. "Check," I said, moving my bishop. Miller groaned. He rubbed his chin, staring at the board. "You are brutal, Doc. You never give an inch." I took a sip of my iced tea. "Why should I?" "The world doesn't give inches, Miller. It takes miles." Miller laughed. He moved his rook to block. Just then the back gate creaked open. It was the mail carrier. He knew us by now. He waved and dropped a small bundle of letters on the table. Mostly bills, I thought. The hospital administration paperwork. A thank you card from one of the nurses who had stayed in the guest room last month. But at the bottom of the stack there was a plain stained envelope. It had no return address label. Just a handwritten scrawl in blue ballpoint pen. The stamp was crooked. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was jagged, rushed. The handwriting of a man who writes on his knee because he doesn't have a desk. Miller saw me stiffen. He looked at the envelope. "Is that him?" Miller asked quietly. I nodded. "David." I hadn't heard from him since the night I blocked his number. I knew through Saul that Jessica had left him for a contractor she met in a parking lot. I knew David had bounced between shelters until he aged out of the emergency assistance program. I picked up the letter opener. I sliced the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper torn from a spiral pad. "Dear Dad, I hope you are good. I hope the house is okay. I am writing this from the break room at Sal's Diner on 45th. I got a job. I am washing dishes. It is hard work. My hands are raw from the soap. My back hurts. I sleep in a room above the kitchen. It smells like grease. I know you are mad. I know I messed up, but I am trying. I really am. I met a guy here who says he can get me into a trade school for HVAC repair. It costs $200 for the registration. I have saved $100. I just need the other $100, please, Dad. It is just $100. You have millions. Just help me this one time. I promise I will pay you back. I just need a leg up. Your son, David." I read the letter twice. I looked at the garden. I looked at the house standing strong and proud behind me. I looked at Miller, a man who wasn't my blood, but who had treated me with more respect in one night than David had in 30 years. $100. To me it was nothing. It was the cost of a good dinner. It was less than the cost of the chess set we were playing on. But to David, it was a test. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a shortcut. He was asking for a bailout. He didn't say, "I am sorry I tried to kill you." He said, "I messed up." He minimized his crime. He still thought of my money as a resource he was entitled to tap just a little bit, just this once. He hadn't learned. He was washing dishes, but his hands were still dirty with entitlement. I folded the letter. Miller was watching me. What does he want? Money, I said. He wants $100 for a trade school registration. Miller raised an eyebrow. Are you going to send it? I smiled. It was a slow, deliberate smile. I am going to send him exactly what he needs, I said. I stood up and walked into the house. I went to the utility drawer in the kitchen, the junk drawer where we keep the things that don't have a place but are too useful to throw away. I dug around past the rubber bands and the batteries. Finally, my fingers closed around cold plastic. I pulled it out. It was the digital thermometer. The exact one Jessica had used that night, the one she had heated under hot water to fake a fever of 104 degrees. The instrument of their deception. I had kept it. I don't know why. Maybe as a trophy. Maybe as a reminder. I walked to my office. I pulled a crisp $50 bill from my wallet. Then I pulled out a piece of heavy cream-colored cardstock. I wrote a note. David, I received your request. You say you are working hard. Good. Keep working. The first $100 is the hardest. The second 100 will teach you the value of the first. I am not sending you the money. Instead, I am returning something you left behind. A diagnostic tool. Use it to check your temperature every morning before you go to work. If it reads normal, go wash dishes. If it reads high, remember the night you threw your father into a blizzard because of a lie. Enclosed is $50, not for school. Buy a coat. Winter is coming. Dr. Carter. I taped the $50 bill to the note. I put the thermometer and the note into a padded envelope. I walked back out to the garden. Miller watched me seal the package. What is in the box, Doc? He asked. A lesson, I said. I put the package in the outgoing mail tray. I sat back down at the chess table. David would open that package. He would see the thermometer. He would remember the heat of the lie and the cold of the betrayal. He would realize that the bank of Dad wasn't just closed. It was demolished. But he would have a warm coat. Because I am not a monster, I am a father. And sometimes being a father means letting your child feel the cold so they learn to build their own fire. I looked at the chessboard. Your move, Miller, I said. Miller moved his queen. Checkmate, Doc. I looked at the board. He had trapped my king. There was nowhere to go. I laughed, a deep belly laugh that startled the birds in the trees. You got me, I said. You finally got me. It felt good to lose a game of chess. Because in the game of life I had won. I had my home, I had my dignity, and I had the silence of a peaceful afternoon. I leaned back and closed my eyes, listening to the wind rustle through the tulips. It wasn't a biting wind anymore. It was a gentle breeze. The storm was over. The fever of greed. A virus can make you sick, but greed makes you rot. I spent a lifetime fighting microscopic enemies only to find the deadliest parasite living in my guest room. David and Jessica thought my age was a weakness, and my silence was surrender. They forgot that you do not survive 73 winters by being fragile. Family is not about blood, it is about who holds the umbrella when it rains. When you throw your father out in the snow, do not be surprised when you freeze alone. Protect your house, but more importantly, protect your heart from those who only love you for what you can provide. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories like Moses's with the world. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own peace? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.